Chapter 346. The edge of the forest was silent. Slender-waist Dance walked out of the forest and waved her hand at Han family young master, indicating that it was over. Han family young master nodded his head and looked at the other three. They were also looking at him. What are you looking at me for? Go do what you need to do. Han family young master waved his hand. The few of them dispersed. The Han clan's young master touched his pockets and found that there were still quite a few bottles of wine. After which, he walked towards the direction of the dungeon, while sending a message to the Sword of Oathless. Call everyone, we will continue to the next stop immediately. What is it? Unsworn Sword asked. The other side's boss is going to jail for 10 hours. If we don't take this chance to leave, do you want to continue fighting with them in the forest tomorrow? Han family young master said. Unsworn Sword's eyes immediately lit up. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. However, because characters couldn't completely die in the game, and could contact their friends at any time, this tactic wasn't very practical. However, throwing the opponent into the dungeon would completely cut off communication. This classic tactic immediately became effective. 10 hours. No rush. Let's wait for Whitestone City's people to come over. Unsworn Sword said. Some of the mercenary group players who died on the way back to Whitestone City decided to quit the quest, but some decided to continue. Right now they were trying to meet up with everyone in Forest Shade City. It's better to hurry. Don't forget about the prison visit. He still has a way to remotely command them, even though it's a bit troublesome. Han family young master said. You're right, but we don't have that many people, even if they don't have the water. Unsworn Sword was still worried. Both sides are in the same situation. We have time to rest and log off, so do they. In terms of numbers, we won't have much of a difference. The key is to seize the opportunity when the water isn't there. You should hurry up. Opportunities are always fleeting. The Han family young master said. Unsworn Sword obviously knew that being wishy-washy was a great enemy. In any case, the current situation was already very bad. How bad could it get? Thinking up to this point, Unsworn Sword gritted his teeth and made up his mind to seize this opportunity. He immediately summoned all of his guild members who were online and notified the mercenary leaders to prepare to depart. Sword of No Oath was a leader after all, so there was no need for the Han family young master to teach him personally. After helping him make up his mind to set off immediately, the Han family young master was the first to arrive outside the dungeon. After paying a hefty visitation fee, he entered the dungeon. There weren't many players who insisted on staying in jail in the dead of night, and most of them were sleeping. They were probably trying to make up for the sleep they had in real life in the game, and get through the painful jail term. This method was not approved by the government. According to the official statement, although there was sleep in the game, and the brain did enter a state of sleep, the recovery of physical fatigue was of no help. This was because the sleeping posture in the game was simulated, and the real posture of the human body depended on reality. Therefore, they would often experience back pain and neck cramps when they slept in the game. This feeling was not simulated, but a signal from their real bodies. This feeling of the real body wouldn't be weakened by the simulation at all. The game company didn't want a fire to break out in a player's house, only for the player to be weakened by the pain, and think that they had been ambushed by a mage. Regarding sleep, some people asked, can't you just take the equipment and lie on the bed to play? The official answer. This is illegal use of the game equipment. We won't be responsible for any damage. Therefore, all the players would rather have back pain than take the risk of breaking the game equipment. The equipment in real life was 100 times better than the best equipment in the game. After looking at the players in the dungeon, the Han family young master finally saw water depth in one of the dungeons. He was alone, lying in the corner of the dungeon, his back facing the outside of the dungeon. Hey, are you going to reflect on yourself? The Han family young master knocked on the dungeon door and said. Water depth slowly turned around, his face green, and said with a fierce expression, You bastard, you still have the face to come. The Han family young master smiled cheekily. Why not? You should know that I like it when people are like this. Water depth gritted his teeth and cracked his knuckles. Just you wait, I'll show you when I get out. The Han family young master smiled and suddenly waved his hand and threw a bottle of wine in. This throw was very clever. If Water Depth didn't dodge, his head would definitely burst. If he dodged, the bottle would hit the wall behind him and splash all over him, and the flying shards might even burst his head. Therefore, he had no choice but to reach out and catch it. Fuck 20, you're really rich. Water Depth wanted to throw it away after drinking, but couldn't help but exclaim when he saw it clearly. This was the most expensive drink in the game, and even Slim Waist Dance might not waste money on it. Drinking in the game had no practical benefits at all. The Han family young master didn't care and continued. You'll be out in 10 hours, but unfortunately, I won't know where I'll be by then. Speaking of which, your mission is only limited to the Shady Forest City segment, right? Do you know which main city we're going to next? As expected. It was a scheme to make me go to jail, and then use this opportunity to escape, Water Depth said. Unexpectedly, the Han family young master actually sighed deeply. I really hope so. If that's the case, then it's really a wonderful scheme. It's just a pity that this time it was just a flash of inspiration. I didn't arrange for those guys to chase and kill me. But in the process, you were very honored to receive PK points, so in a flash I had such a great idea. Come, for this idea, let's drink. Water Depth's face was still dark and he didn't speak. He could only vent his anger on the wine, raising it and taking a fierce gulp. His demeanor and behavior clearly conveyed a message to the Han family young master. He was only drinking, not having a toast with him. Everyone knew that Water Depth's PK points were received in order to help the Han family young master. But he wouldn't say it. To say such words to the Han family young master. Even he himself felt that it was pretentious, and it wouldn't make the Han family young master feel any guilt. In turn, he would scold him for not distinguishing between public and private interests, unclear position, and being a little muddle-headed at a critical moment. Damn, was he muddle-headed? He could only blame himself for having such a good conscience. As soon as he saw that someone was trying to kill him, he didn't think too much before helping. Who was like this guy, keeping everything in mind at the same time, always having an extra thought. Water Depth was having a simulated conversation in his mind, and it was reasonable and well-founded. Don't be too pleased with yourself. In fact, what Water Depth said was, although I'm in jail, my brothers aren't so easy to deal with. The Han family young master smiled. You should know best how capable your brothers are. Water Depth was silent, and he couldn't help but take another sip of the wine in his hand. His brothers. If there was someone stronger than him, then why would he be the boss? All right, that's about it. I'm leaving, the Han family young master said. I sincerely wish you an early death and reincarnation, Water Depth said. That's impossible. You didn't die, and you're only in jail. How could I die? The Han family young master smiled. How do you feel now? What do you mean? Dizzy. The Han family young master asked. Did you drug the wine? When the Han family young master said this, Water Depth did indeed feel a bit dizzy. What a joke. How could there be such drugs in the game? The Han family young master smiled. It's just that this wine is currently the strongest one. Using your naming method of 200s, you should call it 170s. Isn't this 200s? Water Depth stared at the wine bottle. Who says that the wine in a 200s bottle must be 200s? Alright, stop talking nonsense and go to sleep. The Han family young master waved his hand. You bastard. Water Depth mumbled. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. The wine bottle in his hand fell to the ground. It didn't break, but the wine flowed out. There was still about half a bottle left in it. You've already grown quite capable to be able to drink half a bottle. In his daze, Water Depth heard the Han family young master click his tongue in wonder. Then he saw him take out a bag from his pocket and throw it in. This time, our earnings are all yours. Keep it well. If someone takes it when you come in, I won't care. With that said, the Han family young master had already swaggered off. In his daze, Water Depth wanted to see what he threw, but his brain that was stimulated by the simulated alcohol was too dizzy. Finally, he tilted his head and fell asleep. When the Han family young master walked out of the dungeon, he saw several people rushing into the dungeon. He intentionally or unintentionally moved to the side and hid his face. The lighting in the dungeon wasn't good to begin with. In their haste, they didn't care about the other visitors and rushed all the way. The moment the Han family young master left the dungeon, he heard the urgent voices of a few people. Water Depth, stop sleeping. Wake up, they seem to be leaving. Water Depth couldn't hear them, and these people couldn't even reach him. They could only take out some useless things from their pockets and smash them, but they couldn't wake him up. Under their shouts, the other sleeping players were all woken up. It wasn't easy to fall asleep in the game. These people all wanted to rely on closing their eyes and opening their eyes to get through the long prison. In the end, they were woken up by these people, so they were naturally in a bad mood. The dungeon was filled with curses. Unable to make a move, the two sides could only engage in a battle of words. Outside the dungeon, the players in Cloud City were gathering. When Unsworn Sword saw the Han family young master walk out of the dungeon, he was very surprised. "Let's hurry up and go," said the Han family young master. "We'll definitely be exposed if we bring them in." Unsworn Sword looked around cautiously. Who knew where the eyes of Water Depth and the others were hiding? Right now, Water Depth might already know. He'll most likely come up with some sort of plan. While it's inconvenient for him to send a message, let's hurry and leave. Haha, there's no need to be in such a hurry. In about half an hour, Water Depth won't be able to send any orders, said the Han family young master. What? Unsworn Sword was surprised. He drank too much, said the Han family young master calmly. Chapter 347. Why are we suddenly on the road now? The gathered cloud dwellers couldn't help but ask. Because the opportunity is fleeting. Unsworn Sword's expression was as serious as a wolf's tail. There are still a lot of brothers who haven't come yet. What do we do? Someone asked. Go online tomorrow and tell them to rush to the next stop by themselves. Unsworn Sword announced. Where's the next stop? Someone asked. Unsworn Sword looked around and called the players who asked the question to his side. He moved closer and said mysteriously, private chat. There was a lot of cursing. What about Qianli? Sword Demon and the others were only discussing this issue internally. Him? Can he still leave Forest Shade City? With him, everyone may be a burden. Han family young master's words were ruthless. Just dump him like this? Yutian Shenming couldn't bear it. Or you can stay and help him, Han family young master said. How? Yutian Shenming asked. Han family young master spread his hands. Yutian Shenming was deep in thought. Han family young master finally said, well, it's too painful for me to maintain your self-esteem. I'll be frank with you. Trash like you are a burden to him. Help him. Don't be a burden to him, and you'll be helping him. Damn, you're the bastard. Let's go. Yutian Shenming was the first to step out angrily. Yutian, you're walking in the opposite direction, Sword Demon said expressionlessly. Thus, Imperial Heaven Divine Ming expressionlessly turned 180 degrees and continued walking. Let's go. The main force finally began to move. However, the looseness was only external. The distribution and positioning of the various professions in the team had been unknowingly arranged during the march. There would be sufficient preparation for any ambush from any direction. From time to time, the archers would even randomly shoot arrows in all directions. Players would often be hit by mistake, but they would swallow their curses. With such a large group of people, only an idiot would go up and find trouble with them. Walking all the way to the edge of Shady Forest City, he still hadn't seen any movement from Shui's side. Next, they would step into the forest. Everyone's expressions were serious as they looked at each other. After telling each other to take care, they lowered their heads and entered. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was at the very front, leading a group of people to scout for traps, while a warrior and priest accompanied him to protect him. The mages would throw AoE spells in all directions whenever they had the chance. The archers would constantly shoot arrows at the trees in the sky. Although they would often fall and hit their own people, no one complained. The knights would constantly cast spirit blessings on everyone, increasing everyone's magic defense. Behind them were the warriors, who would shake and hit every tree they passed. As for the thieves, they would still wander around the team, taking on the role of scouting and warning. Each person was in charge of a fixed position. If anyone sent a message or sacrificed themselves, the Sword of Unsworn would immediately know where the enemy was. Once bitten, twice shy. All of the tricks that Depp's party had used in the forest had been stopped by the players in Cloud. This time there shouldn't be any problems, right? Indeed. Although Shuei's brothers were still there, many of them had gone offline. At this time, their numbers had also decreased sharply. There were also quite a few mages who had gone to jail, so the impact was still there. In addition, Shui was drunk, and the others couldn't come up with a harmonious solution for a long time. Each of them went their own way. And in the end, they were all accurately and effectively killed off by the Cloud. A surveillance team that had been tailing them couldn't find a suitable opportunity to make a move. In the end, they could only watch helplessly as the other party left the forest. Mixed feelings. The moment the last of the players in Cloud City stepped out of the forest, everyone's feelings could only be described as mixed feelings. They had finally gotten rid of this nightmarish forest that had devoured many of their people. Well done. The Sword of Unsworn arrived in front of the Han family young master, and heavily patted him on the shoulder. Hee, the money this time wasn't wasted, right? The Han family young master said indifferently. Ha, you're being too polite by saying that. What money? The Sword of Unsworn strode away. Speaking of which, he really didn't have any complaints about the fees paid to the child elite group this time. Shady Forest City, the most intense conflict, the heaviest losses, and here they had only gone through half of it, but in the end, the other half had ended so easily and without any mishaps. How could he not be happy? He was willing to spend this money. Before, he might have had opinions about the child elite group, some were suspicious, and some were unconvinced. But reality proved that this group was indeed a great helper that could solve problems. Inviting this group for this mission was really a wise decision. The Sword of Unsworn even expressed his concern for Gu Fei, who had not left with them because he had gone offline. Money? Did you also receive money this time? Where? Yutian Shinming, unscathed in battle, and the others waited until the Sword of Unsworn left before staring at the Han family young master with wide eyes. I've already spent it. The Han family young master said. How did you spend it? The two's eyes widened even more. The water's too deep. The Han family young master said. The two's eyes narrowed slightly, but they were still slightly wider than normal. You gave it all? You should have left some for us. We've been busy for a while too. Busy with what? The Han family young master said impatiently. In the end, the water's depth was settled by slender waist dance. Did you see her ask me for money? Can't you two young masters learn from a young lady's awareness? Damn, is she a normal girl? She's the richest person in the game. The two pointed their middle fingers at the Han family young master. To let the two learn from the richest person in the game's awareness of money, the Han family young master was really too despicable. Alright. On this side, Unsworn Sword was happy enough and began to remind the players that there was a limit to the celebration. It's getting late. We should be 3 hours away from the next main city. Let's hurry up and get on the road. Oh. At this time, the players' morale was definitely high. Those guys in Shady Forest City might not give up so easily. Brother Sword Ghoul, take some thieves with you and sneak behind the team. Keep an eye out for them. If there are no problems after walking for a while, you guys can catch up. What do you think? Unsworn Sword felt that the child elite group was unprecedentedly reliable, and entrusted this responsibility to the sword demon in the group. Very good. The sword demon nodded. Thus, Unsworn Sword selected some thieves from various groups and guilds, and let the sword demon lead the team. Currently, they were lacking in manpower and many mercenary groups had quit. Unsworn Sword could only let the people in the guild take on the risk. Thus, with the others in front and the sword demon bringing some thieves to cover the back, the players in the cloud continued on to the next stop. Those players who were not there at this time received messages from their own side, informing everyone that they had left Shady Forest City overnight for the next stop, and asking them to hurry up and get on the road after seeing this news. Most of the players saw this news quite early, but like Gu Fei, they didn't get the news until after dinner the next day. Naturally, the message to him was very different. Gu Fei was not as simple as just being on the road. If he did not solve the problem of his 30-plus PK points, he would be a disaster wherever he went. The wanted mission was released throughout the game. No matter which main city Gu Fei went to, he would be chased and killed. Gu Fei's PK points at this time was 54 points. At this time, there were already countless voices of worship for this god of killing in the game, inquiring about the ins and outs of this god. If others were like this, how could Gu Fei not take it seriously? Before going online today, he did a lot of homework for the first time. He lingered in the forum area of Shady Forest City, and wantonly learned about the relevant information here. No one wanted to drop 5 levels, and no one wanted to go to jail until the end of time. Gu Fei had only one way out, and that was to do what he had done countless times, the wanted mission. He was determined to wash away his PK points. This was usually easy for him, but at this time it was full of difficulty. First, of course, those powerful guards would start to arrest him as soon as he appeared. Don't question how they found you. Players could have the wind-chasing emblem that refreshed coordinates once a minute. What could the shameless system have a coordinate tracker that refreshed coordinates once a second? Second, Gu Fei was not familiar with Shady Forest City, very unfamiliar. In Cloud City, he had perfected it to the point where he could know the terrain and the number of people nearby with a glance at the coordinates. This was the accumulation of countless chases and killings in the streets and alleys. But in Shady Forest City, he had to pay attention to the coordinates under his feet as he ran, the coordinates of the intersection ahead, and the situation with pursuers behind him was too disadvantageous. This first problem could only be solved by Gu Fei washing away his PK points, and the second problem was the preparation that Gu Fei had done today. He spent almost half a day familiarizing himself with the Shady Forest map that the players had hand-drawn in the forum, familiarizing himself with the coordinates of each location, and calculating in his mind what could be used in those coordinates. In addition, he actually wanted to understand what loopholes there were in the rules of the 30-plus wanted system that could be exploited, or whether these guards had any flaws. Unfortunately, the information in this area was completely zero. Gu Fei was the first god to have a PK points of 30+. He had no lessons learned from the mistakes of others. He was the first pioneer who could pass on his experience to the latecomers after eating crabs. Gu Fei was quite annoyed. If he went online, even if that kid Hongchen Yixia was online, he was afraid that he wouldn't have the time to get any information. Maps, topography, location. All he could do was memorize these things to make his quests in Shady Forest City more efficient. The reputation of a super martial arts genius was not undeserved. Gu Fei, who was proficient in all kinds of martial arts, should not have any doubts about his memory. After half a day of repeated memorization and self-examination, Gu Fei was confident that there would be no mistakes, so he confidently connected to the game. Chapter 348. A white light flashed in the offline area, and the moment Gu Fei appeared, there were already countless exclamations around him. While most of the players were still guessing who this person with a PK value of 54 was, the incident in Shady Forest City had already spread. This PK master was currently the most popular videocaster. Some nosy players even went offline and watched the video over and over again, memorizing Gu Fei's outfit. Some people took screenshots of the moonlight spiritual robe from the shoulders to the waist and zoomed in clearly on how many folds there were. As soon as Gu Fei showed himself, he was immediately seen through. Screams and screams spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100. There was always a crowd around the resurrection point, and it only took a moment for them to gather. Unfortunately, Gu Fei was once again surrounded by an inhumane crowd. Gu Fei had calculated everything, but he still failed to take into account the players' mentality of gossip. For these players who spent countless hours in the game, gossip was a powerful force that Gu Fei could not imagine. TSK. Gu Fei did not fight with anyone, and he did not use any skills, so the players could only sigh and sigh as they sized him up. "Everyone, can you please make way?" Gu Fei said helplessly. Okay. The spectators also had a bottom line, and they could not restrict their freedom just because they were spectators. The players blocking the entrance of the resurrection point squeezed to the left and right, opening up a path for Gu Fei. Everyone, you've worked hard. If there's nothing else, you can disperse. Gu Fei waved at the crowd as he squeezed out of the narrow path that had been opened up. From time to time, there were actually players who wanted to shake hands with Gu Fei, and Gu Fei wiped his sweat as he waved back. I really have the temperament of a star, Gu Fei thought. Unfortunately, this joyous scene did not last long. Suddenly, there was a burst of, "Who is it? Don't push," from the crowd at the back, and Gu Fei immediately knew that the one who should come had come. The system guards were still as clueless as ever. With so many players crammed in there, they didn't yell for them to give way. They didn't choose to take a detour, and they didn't touch the players either. They just kept moving forward. All they knew was that Gu Fei was in front of them, and the shortest distance between them was a straight line. The intelligence of these guards made the players who loved the game very much doubt the AI system of the game. The system guards had strength and strength, which was why the Prowler arrow formation that had attacked water depth yesterday had been easily dispersed. However, it should not be forgotten that the formation was set up by the players when they were PvP. There had to be a certain amount of space between the players. Therefore, when the players collided with each other, there would be space for them to stumble. But at this moment, they were spectators, inhumane spectators. No matter how strong the system guards were, they couldn't defy the laws of physics and crush the players into meat patties. Although their strength was great, it wasn't infinite. With so many players piled together, pushing them away like a bulldozer was easier said than done. But Gu Fei could clearly sense that the narrow path that the players had voluntarily made for him was being taken over by the guards. Gu Fei did not dare to hesitate any longer. He hurriedly used instant transmission and floated 5 meters forward. Almost at the same time, the players on both sides of the area behind him were closely grouped together, waving their arms and cursing wildly. That was close, Gu Fei cried in his heart. Fortunately, the guards didn't line up like bulldozers, so they only collided with a small area. At this time, he was considered to have escaped the danger of a few meters, but the players in that area were poor. Caught off guard, they were squeezed together like Siamese twins. This was an opportunity. Gu Fei's eyes lit up. Obviously, under the idiotic charge of the system guards, the players would disperse soon, but they couldn't be too fast. This barrier was very effective, and he couldn't miss this opportunity. Thinking to this point, Gu Fei tried to quicken his steps, and to those passionate fans who were still reaching out to shake his hand, he acted like he was in a hurry, brushing them off with his fingertips. This also showed that the quality of the players was higher than that of the fans of the stars. At least in this situation where there were no security guards, no one rushed up to grab onto Gu Fei. Of course, this was also because the two were fundamentally different. Stars relied on their fans to make a living, and wouldn't attack their fans. But for Gu Fei, with a swing of his blade, it was a level, a point of PK value. Gu Fei finally rushed out of the small path, and the players were about to explode under the impact of the system guards. But Gu Fei had already disappeared from everyone's sight without a care. The players' cursing was still unceasing, and gradually spread out under the impact. When they found out that they had blocked the system's path to capture the guards, everyone was filled with regret. This was also the show that they had wanted to see. This once again showed the difference between fans of the stars and fans of Gu Fei. Fans of the stars definitely wouldn't want their idol to be chased and attacked. Gu Fei ran wildly on the street, and everywhere he went he continued to attract attention. The players all pointed at him and shouted, "Wife, come out and look at the god," over and over again. But Gu Fei's speed wasn't fake, and it wasn't so easy to form a crowd of onlookers. And quite a distance away, the system guards were neatly and vigorously chasing him under the leadership of their captain. Numb expressions, cold eyes, seemingly slow, but absolutely stable and efficient footsteps. This group of guards was like the demonic Terminators in the movies. And Gu Fei was the target they wanted to eliminate. Those players who were careless and blocked the way were lucky to be knocked into the air. What was worse was that they were repeatedly trampled after being knocked down. Even if they didn't die, they suffered enough. And behind this line of guards was a large group of Forest Shade City players, completely out of formation and out of position. It was just a chaotic group of onlookers, chasing after the guards' footsteps to watch the show. This trilogy of people from one person to a team, and then to a group of people became a scenery of Forest Shade City, and it was survival of the fittest. Those who weren't fast enough were quickly obliterated from the scenery. Gu Fei looked back as he ran. Seeing that the guards were still far away, he couldn't bear to use teleportation. With a day's worth of revision, Gu Fei arrived at the wanted mission office very smoothly and at the fastest speed. Pushing the door in and accepting the mission, Gu Fei was familiar with all of this. It was just that when he scanned the mission list, he almost vomited blood on the screen. Forest Shade City was really too peaceful. Apart from a few rare PK players at the top, the following pages were all ones. Gu Fei didn't have the time to care about this. He hurriedly accepted one and flashed out of the mission office. If he was chased into the room by the guards, it would definitely be a dead end. The moment he stepped out of the door, he saw the guards rushing out of the street and charging toward him. Gu Fei didn't look at the coordinates first and ran in the direction away from the guards. Only when he was on the right track did he open the coordinates displayed by the wind-chasing emblem to take a look. He immediately felt a headache. This target wasn't anywhere else, but in the opposite direction of Gu Fei. From here, the shortest distance was to immediately turn his head, and then brush past the system guards. This was undoubtedly too risky, but Gu Fei's day's homework came into play at this time. His mind instantly outlined the most efficient route to the target in circles. At the intersection ahead, Gu Fei quickly turned and set foot on this route. But a minute later, the coordinates were refreshed again. When Gu Fei opened it to take a look, he immediately complained. Luck had abandoned him this time. Judging from the coordinates the other party had moved twice, Gu Fei already had enough reason to believe that this damn person was actually a member of the third scenery line at this time. If he didn't want to turn around and break through the system guards, then it seemed that there was only one way. Find a place to turn in a circle and circle behind the other party in the form of a loop. The houses in the city were lined up in rows, and there were many places to circle. However, with such a large circle scale, not to mention whether Gu Fei had enough time to complete the loop. Even if he did, where would he find this guy, number 56841, in a large group of fans and players? Solving this dilemma was once again thanks to Gu Fei's day of review. Gu Fei, who understood the topography of Forest Shade City, had been running all the way while combining what he saw in front of him with what he had reviewed. At this time, after seeing the scenery in front of him, Gu Fei had a good idea to get out of this predicament at this time. The Roundwood Tavern, the largest tavern in the center of Forest Shade City. As its name suggested, the tavern was in the shape of a round wooden stake, and there were even rings painted on the roof like an old wooden stake. Gu Fei, who rushed to the door of the tavern, did not enter, but circled around the tavern for half a circle. At this time, after chasing all the way, the system guards were only 2 or 3 meters away from Gu Fei. Gu Fei, who had run half a circle around the Roundwood Tavern, jumped up and pointed in the air, teleported, and flew to the roof of the tavern as far as he could. After landing, he continued to run, and the sound of heavy objects hitting the ground came one after another from behind. Gu Fei knew that the group of system guards were performing the earth-splitting flying up the roof technique again. But Gu Fei's mind was not on them at the moment. He quickly rushed to the edge of the roof and ran along the eaves. As Gu Fei expected, the third scene just happened to catch up to this position at this time, and was running close to the Roundwood Tavern. Gu Fei, who was condescending, had a panoramic view of all of them. In the eyes of the player who had accepted the mission, one of them was clearly marked with the number 56841. Gu Fei, who had not stopped running, had at this time taken advantage of the momentum to soar into the sky. Double flame flash. Gu Fei shouted, and the dark stream sword in his hand stabbed out fiercely. At this critical moment, Gu Fei did not care about the dangerous moves that were not suitable for children to imitate, and this sword went straight for the other party's head. The sword cut through the wind, and the wind blew away the fire. Gu Fei could feel the burning of the double flame flash on his own face. In an instant, Gu Fei found some of the legendary feeling of becoming one with the sword. Chapter 349. The players who could become part of this scene all had a certain level of speed. At the moment, it seemed that only Slim Waist Dance, who had a certain level of speed and could withstand Gu Fei's double flame flash, could do so when she was wearing her fire-resistant equipment. The person in front of them was just one of the many players in Shady Forest City. The feat of not dying after taking a hit from Gu Fei clearly didn't belong to him. At the same time the white light flashed, Gu Fei's falling momentum didn't stop. The flames in the dark night stream sword were still scattered in the wind, piercing through the white light. It looked like Gu Fei had blown up his head with one hit. The spectators paled, and someone exclaimed, "The Almighty is killing again." In an instant, everyone around Gu Fei went blank. Everyone held their weapons in front of their chests, looking like they were protecting themselves. "Don't be nervous, it's just a wanted mission. Why would I kill innocent people?" Gu Fei said. Oh, everyone understood that it was a wanted mission, and they had seen Gu Fei enter and run out of the wanted mission office. However, Gu Fei said he would never kill innocent people, so everyone could only say, "Tisk." 54 PK points, that was 54 lives. Would you believe such a person if he said he wouldn't kill innocent people? In any case, the player's nervousness was finally alleviated. Gu Fei continued to run, but the spectators were craning their necks under the eaves of the Roundwood Tavern, looking for the whereabouts of the system guards. Suddenly, the sound of something rising from the ground came from the air. Several figures flew up one after another, still maintaining their order in the air. So cool. The players were fascinated. When these figures landed on the ground one by one, the onlookers' gasps of admiration turned into cries of agony. Who would have thought that these system guards would use earth-shattering slash when they went up, and would also use earth-shattering slash when they jumped down? Although they didn't intentionally target the players, there were always unfortunate people who happened to stand under their blades. How could these hot-headed guards avoid this? With a slash of their swords, the white light of the players' deaths was scattered. As for those who were lucky enough to avoid the attack, they could only hate the fact that earth-shattering slash was an AoE attack. When the first slash landed, they lost more than half of their HP. Before they could escape, the second slash landed, and a white light flashed as he shouted. Gu Fei turned around to look. The tragic scene of white light blooming beside the tavern was something he did not expect. The facts tell us that there is a possibility that something could happen to a bystander. Gu Fei continued to run, and the guards continued to chase after him, luring the group of people away for a while. Just as they were about to catch up, Gu Fei patted the wind-chasing emblem and activated the emblem's teleportation function. Wanted mission complete, directly teleported back to the mission issuance office. Gu Fei already knew how fast the guards moved. After reviewing the map of Forest Shade City for a day, Gu Fei could roughly judge the route they would take to rush to the wanted mission office from their location. The distance was known, the speed was known, and so was the time. Simple physics. With this bit of time, Gu Fei could do a lot of things. For example, eating an apple to replenish his mana. There were still a bunch of small numbers on the wanted mission board. To be honest, there were still some large numbers last night, but they had been wiped out by the mercenary players in Cloud City or the Brothers Underwater Depths banner. After replenishing his mana, he accepted a mission, checked the coordinates with the emblem, and determined the route in his mind. At this time, Gu Fei also knew the approximate location of the system guards very well. As the first premeditated PK operation in history, Gu Fei's plan could not be said to be imperfect. The original difficulty was only the first wave. The first wave of the system guards could not be predicted, and Gu Fei was worried that they would target him as soon as he left the resurrection area. If that happened, it would be difficult to shake them off. Gu Fei originally had no confidence in completing the first mission with them chasing him all the way. Fortunately, thanks to the onlookers, Gu Fei also bought time for the first wave of the mission. After successfully completing a mission, Gu Fei could use the wind-chasing emblem to distance himself from the system guards. And every time he completed a mission after that, he could once again increase the distance. It was a simple and wonderful cycle. Unless the target of the mission happened to fall next to the guards, it would take some twists and turns. However, the probability of such a coincidence was really not high in such a big tree-shade city. In short, Gu Fei had not encountered it yet. After a full 2 hours of hard work, Gu Fei finally let out a long sigh. His PK value finally dropped to 29 points, of which the wanted mission consumed 24 points, and automatically cleared 1 point every 2 hours. Below 30, there would be no system guards actively pursuing him. As long as he avoided the fixed guards and patrolling soldiers in the main city, it would be much easier. Should he wipe out his PK value in one go, or seize the time to catch up with the team that had set off long ago? After hesitating for a while, Gu Fei shouted twice in the mercenary channel, "Yo, you're not in jail." Han family young master's first reaction. My PK value is already 29. Gu Fei announced his results. What did you do to the guards? Yutian Shenming asked. In their hearts, Gu Fei's ability had been magnified infinitely, and they really doubted that there was anything he could not defeat. But this time, they also overestimated Gu Fei. Nothing much. Gu Fei answered truthfully, then asked, "How are you guys?" We're waiting for the ship." From Han family young master's words, Gu Fei could already feel the resentment. "The ship to waterfront city. Brother," you added. "We've been waiting for 2 hours," Yutian Shenming said. Damn it. Unscathed in battle had nothing else to say and could only curse. "Don't tell me the ship hasn't arrived by the time I arrive?" Gu Fei laughed. "I'm sorry, I can already see the ship," Han family young master said indifferently. "You should be on your way now. With your speed, you should be able to arrive here in about an hour, enough to catch the 11 o'clock ship." "Brother," you said. "How long will the ship take?" Gu Fei frowned. "About half an hour, according to the information I understand." "Brother," you said. "Oh, that's fine. It won't be too late to log off." Gu Fei breathed a sigh of relief. "I'll be there soon." Several stay-up all-night level experts rolled their eyes. After packing up his luggage, Gu Fei stepped out of Forest Shade City's wanted mission office. Slowly walking on the street, the system guards who had been following him finally did not appear again. Gu Fei breathed easily, feeling that the air of Forest Shade City was a lot fresher. Until he arrived outside the city gate, a large group of people seemed to be seeing him off. Gu Fei casually glanced at them and found that he actually knew them. After that group of people saw Gu Fei, several of their eyes were already wide open. One of them had already pulled out a big sword, shouting, "I'll cut you to death," and slashed at him. This time it was Gu Fei's turn to stare. The direction in which this person was rushing was 2 meters away from Gu Fei, and he was waving his big sword and shouting. Did he drink too much? Gu Fei smelled the alcohol floating in the air, and looked at the group of people again. All of them had red eyes and faces, leaning on each other and staggering. A mage stood up again, pointing his staff at Gu Fei. Thunder, 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 thunder for a long time, and looked back at the person beside him. Thunder what again? Thunder and lightning. Descend. This person pointed at Gu Fei and shouted. Not to mention that he was not a mage. Even if he was a thunder mage, the chanting would not have any effect if he added spontaneously in the chant. However, it finally hinted at the person in front of him. The mage raised his staff and was about to chant again. When Gu Fei was also about to take some measures, someone finally reached out and pulled the mage's arm away and said, "Forget it. Mang Mang. It's this guy." Mage Lani pointed at Gu Fei and finally said something. "I know." Mang Mang nodded. "I've already solved the matter with him in Cloud City. There's no need to continue to pester him." Lani, who had drunk too much, was obviously not very clear. He swayed and mumbled something vaguely, but his hand that was about to cast a spell finally retracted. Mang Mang looked at Gu Fei. "You're also going to chase after them, right?" "Yes." Gu Fei nodded. "Where are you, Zai and the others?" "They left last night. I had a gathering with my friends." Mang Mang replied. "You've been gathering since last night?" Gu Fei looked at the state of these people. They were so drunk that it was believable to say that they had gone through a long drinking battle. Sure enough, Mang Mang rubbed her eyes. Her face also revealed a tired expression. She nodded and said, "Yes." "Then now, do you still want to continue the mission?" Gu Fei looked at these people in front of him. They were obviously Mang Mang's old friends in Moonlit Night City. From now on, it was very reasonable to hang out with them. "Of course, I have to do what I promised." Mang Mang said. Let's go together. Oh, let's go. Gu Fei of course had no reason to refuse. Mang 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 said goodbye to her group of old friends one by one, and went on the road with Gu Fei. The two of them knew the route. On Gu Fei's side, the child elite group had told him. On Mang Mang's side, it was even more exaggerated. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was afraid that she would not be able to reunite if she went the wrong way, so he gave her a detailed description of the route 180 times. However, with the addition of a cleric, Gu Fei's speed was unfortunately slowed down. It was absolutely impossible to reach in an hour. As for 2 hours, Gu Fei looked at the time. If it took 2 hours, it seems like we won't be able to make the 11 o'clock boat, right? Gu Fei said. Don't worry. The fairy said that there is an offline area. It won't affect you going offline on time. Mang glanced at him. Is that so? That's good. Gu Fei smiled. Chapter 350. After walking with boundless Mang for a while, Gu Fei found that he had made a serious mistake. He mistakenly thought that boundless Mang was sober, but in fact he was wrong. Boundless Mang was also drunk. This misunderstanding was entirely due to the theory of relativity. Compared with Lan Yi's group of messed up guys, boundless Mang's unique reserve as a woman had deceived Gu Fei. At this time, having lost the object of comparison, she also showed her true colors. She swayed as she walked, and when she opened her mouth, the air was filled with the smell of alcohol. Gu Fei turned around to look for Lan Yi's group, but the group of drunkards had already disappeared. Hey! Gu Fei called out to her. What? Boundless Mang half turned and squinted at Gu Fei. There's a tree in front of you, Gu Fei said. Do you think I don't know? Boundless Mang raised her arm and pushed the tree in front of her that she had almost hit. As a result, her body swung to the side, and her head hit another tree. Without waiting for Gu Fei to speak, Boundless Mang had already quickly straightened her head, patted the tree again and said, Sorry. What else could Gu Fei say besides holding his forehead? I say, why don't we go back to Forest Shade City and rest for a while? Gu Fei looked at Boundless Mang who continued to walk forward and sighed. Huh. Do you think I'm drunk? Boundless Mang squinted at him. Aren't you drunk? Gu Fei asked rhetorically. It was really too honest. Of course I'm not drunk. Boundless Mang continued to move forward. Gu Fei was speechless. It should be known that Boundless Mang was originally a tough person who would be beaten to death. At this time, with the addition of the attribute of being stubborn after being drunk, it was really too difficult to persuade her. Helpless, Gu Fei could only follow behind her, and from time to time he would pull her, accompanied by "What are you doing? I can walk." Cries which saved her from the crisis of hitting the tree countless times. Apart from putting up a strong front, people who drank too much were also talkative. Mang, who was originally not very talkative, became sharp-tongued at this time. Her topic of conversation was also from nearby, and she was talking about Gu Fei who was following behind her. When it came to Gu Fei, the biggest question was, of course, why are you so powerful? It's nothing. It's mainly because I know some kung fu. Gu Fei told the truth. Kung fu? Humph. Mang looked at Gu Fei with a look that said, Don't think you can fool me just because I'm drunk. Gu Fei facepalmed again. She was just a drunk girl. Why did he have to be so serious? Tree. Gu Fei couldn't remember how many times he had shouted that. The boundless Mang reflexively twisted her body, dodging a large tree in front of her with great difficulty. At this speed, can we get there before 12 o'clock? Gu Fei thought sorrowfully. But misfortune and fortune always came hand in hand. For Gu Fei, the only good news was that the effects of alcohol in the game were not as severe as in reality. It was also greatly reduced, just like the pain he felt. Therefore, when he stopped drinking, he sobered up quite quickly. This was also the reason why Lan Yi and the others could drink for nearly 20 hours. Don't think that they were a group of gods of wine. This was accomplished under special conditions. When they walked out of the forest with difficulty, the boundless Mang finally sobered up. From the beginning of her chattering, to gradually becoming silent, to now that her eyes were starting to clear up, Gu Fei had a very intuitive feeling. You're awake. After saying kung fu, Gu Fei, who hadn't said anything else besides tree, finally said something new. The boundless Mang Mang actually showed a look of shame. She was undoubtedly a smart person. Even smart people couldn't avoid getting drunk, but at least she knew that a drunk person wouldn't leave an interesting impression on others. What did I say? It looked like the boundless Mang Mang was smarter than the average person. She was even more aware of the problems she would have when she was drunk. This was a problem that many old drunkards who had roamed the wine scene for many years often neglected. Oh, nothing. You were talking nonsense, I didn't really hear you. Gu Fei was obviously also a smart person. He knew that he didn't need to listen to the words of a drunk person too seriously. In reality, it was common for drunken slip of the tongue, but it wasn't necessarily true when drunk. It was also common for drunken bragging to the heavens. The originally silent boundless Mang Mang became even more silent at this time. The two of them then began what should have been a silent journey. That. Gu Fei suddenly spoke. The boundless Mang Mang immediately turned around and saw that Gu Fei was holding a pair of shoes in his hands. We're walking a bit slow, you can wear my shoes first. Gu Fei extended the shoes in his hands in front of her. Are your shoes awesome? The boundless Mang Mang didn't hesitate and happily took it. It seems to be better than yours. Of course, Gu Fei's words were not nonsense. Along the way, he was bored and used his appraisal skill countless times. With his shallow skills, he finally appraised the cloth shoes of the boundless Mang Mang. It's really amazing. The boundless Mang Mang was also shocked after receiving the wind-chasing boots. She casually asked, "Where did you get these shoes?" "I consecutively completed the wanted mission 100 times. Gu Fei didn't hide anything from her. Oh. The boundless Mang Mang was stunned for a moment before she immediately reacted. No wonder you always do that mission. So there's this kind of reward? Gu Fei didn't explain the real reason why he did that mission. He only briefly introduced the rewards that he received and the conditions that they met. Oh, I see. The boundless Mang Mang nodded. Do you need me to help you keep it a secret? She asked with a smile. There were too many players who would try their best not to let others know when they unearthed some unknown secrets. Secret? Whatever. Gu Fei shrugged. Boundless Mang Mang clearly already knew this answer. Otherwise, there was no need for Gu Fei to tell her everything. After changing into Gu Fei's shoes and running for 2 steps in the boundless wilderness, his speed had indeed improved greatly. Hey! Suddenly, she heard Gu Fei call her from behind. He turned his head back in a daze. Please lend me your shoes first. Gu Fei smiled bitterly. At this moment he was standing on the ground barefooted. Oh sorry. Mang Mang hurriedly threw her shoes to Gu Fei. The boundless boots only added movement speed. For Gu Fei, who put all his points into agility, this kind of boots wasn't worth as much as a percentage. It could be said that his speed had been severely weakened, but it was still faster than the vast expanse. The two of them resumed their journey at full speed. There was no need to take detours in the vast wilderness. Gu Fei's hope of catching the 11 o'clock ship was rekindled. However, the reality was cruel. When the two of them arrived at the dock, they just happened to see a huge ship slowly sailing away from the shore, not giving them any chance. Damn. Boundless Mang Mang fiercely pointed her middle finger at the huge ship, finally showing her demeanor as the demoness of Moonlit Night City. I didn't catch the ship. Gu Fei said regretfully in the mercenary channel. Yeah, we saw you. Han family young master replied. Where? Gu Fei looked around. On the ship. Han family young master said. Gu Fei had only been paying attention to the departure of the ship and the middle finger. He had not paid attention to the movements on the ship. When he took a closer look, he saw Yutian Shenming standing at the stern of the ship with his arms outstretched in a classic Titanic pose. However, he was quickly grabbed by unscathed in battle and tossed aside. Yutian Shenming then went forward and opened his arms. Gu Fei retracted his gaze and looked at the vast expanse. Fine, tell me where the offline zone is. In the vast expanse, he only knew that there was an offline area here, but he really didn't know the specific location. Get off the deck and head west. It's not too far away. A very close voice floated over. Thanks. Gu Fei was surprised as he answered. Someone was right beside him, but he didn't notice. This was too unbelievable. Turning his gaze in the direction of the voice, he saw a man lying lazily on a pile of grass in a half-broken straw shed next to the dock's deck. His hands were behind his head, and he was chewing on a piece of grass. His face was covered by a broken straw hat. Looking at the face covered by the straw hat, and recalling the voice just now, Gu Fei had already guessed who this person was. He took 2 steps forward and stretched out his sword. Swoosh! The straw hat was sent flying. Hey, that's too rude. Shi Xiaotian reached out to grab his straw hat. However, Gu Fei's sword was faster. He flipped his hand and knocked the straw hat towards him. He stretched out his left hand and caught it. Swoosh swoosh. He played with it. What are you doing here? Gu Fei asked as he held his sword tightly and looked around. Wherever Shi Xiaotian was, there would definitely be danger within a few meters. This was common sense to Gu Fei. Don't be nervous. I'm just an ordinary passerby. Shi Xiaotian was not in a good mood. Give me back my straw hat. There's no one else looking for you. Why are you covering your face? Gu Fei asked. I'm used to it. Can't I? Shi Xiaotian said. Is that so? Gu Fei flicked his finger and the straw hat flew. Shi Xiaotian wanted to catch it, but Gu Fei's other hand raised his sword. With a few swoosh swoosh swoosh, the straw hat was turned into a pile of straw and scattered all over Shi Xiaotian's body. Shi Xiaotian's straw hat was a handicraft and not a piece of equipment. It was easy to destroy. You! Shi Xiaotian was so angry that he couldn't speak. Gu Fei didn't care. He calmly looked around. He felt that someone would definitely appear. Why would Shi Xiaotian come to this kind of place for no reason? Just as Gu Fei was thinking about it, he saw a player quickly walk out from the other side of the deck. Thud, thud, thud. Gu Fei applauded his own judgment. That person was already in front of him. He smiled and said, Did you 3 miss the boat? How about it? Do you want to test my boat? Chapter 351. Your boat. The 3 of them looked at the newcomer. It was an average-looking warrior. After using appraisal, he didn't have any eye-catching equipment on him. He was only level 38, which was one of the lower levels. That's right, the newcomer said with a smile. Are you going to Waterside City? That ship has just left, so it will take 2 hours for the new one to arrive. Then, it will take another 2 hours for it to depart, which is equivalent to 4 hours before we can set off. So why don't you try my ship? Where did you get your boat? Shi Xiaotian, the jack of all trades, was the one who was most familiar with all aspects of the game. She had never heard of a player possessing a ship in the game. Oh, I made it myself, the newcomer said. You made it yourself? The 3 of them muttered. This was a field they didn't understand. How did he make a boat? The 3 of them couldn't get any answers. There were a lot of people waiting for a boat just now, right? Didn't you invite them to ride on your boat? Gu Fei suddenly asked. The newcomer smiled bitterly and said, I'm very willing, but my boat isn't that big. Oh, the 3 of them were relieved. Are the 3 of you interested? The newcomer continued. Shi Xiaotian rolled his eyes and asked, I'm afraid we didn't take this ship for nothing, did we? The newcomer chuckled. If you want to take a boat, of course you have to buy a ticket. How much is 1 ticket? Shi Xiaotian asked. 50 gold coins, the newcomer replied. So expensive. The 3 of them exclaimed. The newcomer only said indifferently, the system's boat is 60 gold coins. Fuck, the system is always the blackest. Boundless indignation. The players of the parallel world were familiar with ripping people off without blinking. Most of the businesses monopolized by the system were priced at a high price, which infuriated the players, but they couldn't do anything about it. Many knowledgeable people predicted that breaking the system's monopoly would be a path to becoming the richest person in the game. The players of the parallel world had long been resentful of the system's monopoly. Even if they were to compete at the same price, most of them wouldn't be willing to let the system take their money. The player in front of them who developed his own boat seemed to have the intention of entering this realm. The 3 of them were finally interested in this person and his ship. The 3 of you, please follow me. Seeing that the deal was done, the man was also very happy. He led the 3 of them to another shabby straw hut at the pier. Where's the ship? While the 3 of them were puzzled, The man entered the straw shed and deftly pushed aside the thick layer of straw. A small wooden boat that looked like a park for people to play games appeared in front of the three of them. This ship? Will it work? The three of them were a little doubtful. After all, the large body of water created by the system was much stronger than the broken man-made lake in the park. The surface of the water was boundless and filled with fog. The speed of the system's ship did not seem to be fast, but at this time, it had already been swallowed by the fog and could not be seen. Don't worry, I've been doing this business for a long time. The water is calmer than you think. As long as you know the direction, you can even paddle across with a piece of wood. The man let the three of them relax as he continued to clean the straw covering the boat. He explained helplessly, "It really won't work if I don't hide it like this. Well, this is considered a prop that I made, but you won't let me put it in my pocket. I think it might be too heavy. After a few more levels, it should be fine." The man's face was full of longing, imagining the days when he could carry the boat in his pocket with him everywhere he went. After sweeping the straw clean, he retreated to the back of the boat and gave it a push. The boat was already on the surface of the water. "The three of you, get on the boat," the man said with a face full of smiles. The three of them boarded the boat one after another. The man took out an extremely long bamboo pole from his pocket and stuck it into the water. With a push, the boat had already left the shore. The man took one pole after another, his movements smooth and skilled. The boat sailed quickly and steadily. It was obvious that he was well versed in this way. Just like how Gu Fei's kung fu was used for PK in the game, it was a real-life skill used in the game. "The three of you, can you pay for the boat in advance?" the man said as he pushed the boat. "To be honest, when we get there, the three of you can just leave. I'm alone and weak, I really can't do anything to you." The three of them didn't say anything after hearing this. They each took out their money and happily paid the bill. For players who had reached this level, 50 gold was still within the reach of most players. "Thanks." After receiving the money, the man worked even harder. The boat got further and further away from the shore, and the water got deeper and deeper. When the bamboo pole was no longer useful, the man put it away, took out 2 oars and tied them to the back of the boat. He began to row the oars forward, his movements still maintaining a professional and smooth flow. At this time, the three of them had already worn out the novelty of the boat and the boatman. They no longer looked at how he steered the boat, but instead began to chat while admiring the lake scenery along the way. "You two are friends?" In the vast expanse, she asked the question that she wanted to ask when they were on the shore. It was certain that Gu Fei and Shi Xiaotian knew each other. It was just that their relationship seemed a bit strange. It seemed like they were friends, but also like they were enemies. When she asked this question, the two of them didn't say anything. This made her feel even more strange about their relationship. However, in the vast expanse, there were a few girls who weren't nosy and didn't continue to ask, "What are you doing here?" Gu Fei also began to ask Shi Xiaotian. He discovered that there really didn't seem to be any victims around. Shi Xiaotian's appearance here was really strange. "Same as you guys, a quest to dominate the world," Shi Xiaotian said. "Oh, you're here too? How come I didn't see you?" Gu Fei felt strange. "There are over 1,000 people. You didn't see any accidents?" Shi Xiaotian said. "Then how did you miss the boat? You seem to have arrived earlier than us, right?" When Gu Fei and the others arrived, the boat left for a while. If Shi Xiaotian was a bit earlier than them, he should have been able to catch up. "I arrived a long time ago. I was just killing some monsters nearby. In the end, I didn't get the time right and was just a little late. If I were you, I would have been able to catch up," Shi Xiaotian said. Teleportation," Shi Xiaotian said. "Oh." Gu Fei nodded. At this time, the three of them discovered that the rhythmic paddling sound at the stern of the boat had suddenly stopped. The boat's speed also clearly began to slow down. The three of them turned around and saw that the guy at the stern had already stopped paddling. They didn't know when, but he was holding a shield in his hand. He was smiling at the three of them. When he saw the three of them turn around, he immediately said, "You three, do you know how to swim?" "What do you mean?" The three of them had already realized that something was wrong. "If you don't know how to swim, then I'll capsize the boat. I'm afraid you'll be in trouble. If you know how to swim, how are you in the water? Have you fought with people in the water before? This person said. The three of them looked at each other. Fighting with people in the water. This was something that not many people had done. Gu Fei was even more out of the question. He directly belonged to the former. He didn't know how to swim. If he fell into the water, he would immediately drown. What was the point of fighting? Oh, what do I have to do so that you won't do it? Gu Fei asked. It's very simple. 1 level, 300 gold coins. You're all above level 38, right? If there's a 300 gold coin business to level up, you definitely won't feel like you're losing out. This person said. In other words, each of us needs to pay you 300 gold coins? Gu Fei said. No. This person shook his head. The two beauties only need to pay 300 gold coins. This brother, you have to pay 1,200 gold coins. Because you don't have 1 level, but 4. How do you know that I have PK points? Gu Fei was surprised. He had 29 PK points, and if he died he would lose 4 levels. Hee, there are a lot of strange equipment in this game. This person replied. 1,200 gold coins. I don't have that much money on hand. Gu Fei said. Very few people do. This person had some common knowledge about the game. 1,200 gold coins was a huge amount of money, and some people didn't have that much. So I allow you to use things like equipment as gold coins. Is that so? Gu Fei thought for a while. Brother, you seem to be stalling for time. This person laughed. I know who you are. With such a high PK points, you're that videocaster, right? I know that your dual flame flash is very powerful. And from what I heard just now, you can also teleport? Are you trying to suddenly teleport to my side when I'm not paying attention, and use your dual flame flash? But look, I know you so well. How could I not be on guard? You can't insta-kill me. If you can't insta-kill me, I'll immediately jump into the water and capsize the boat. So brother, you should calm down. I know you're a fierce person, but it's not a big deal to admit defeat once in a while. This person spoke with fervor and assurance, and was determined to win. At the same time, Shi Xiaotian, who had used Identify on him, sent a private message to Gu Fei. His shield is fire resistant. It's fine. Gu Fei replied. What are you going to do? Shi Xiaotian asked. Cut him down. Gu Fei replied simply. How? Just like he said. Gu Fei said. You can insta-kill him? Heavy armored warriors fire-resistant shields, Shi Xiaotian reminded. I can only try. Gu Fei said. He had never thought of compromising with this kind of person. Maybe it's safer. As Shi Xiaotian sent the message, that person just finished speaking with fervor and assurance. Shi Xiaotian immediately followed up. I'll pay. Pretty girls are smart. This person laughed. Slowly take out the money bag and throw it at my feet. When he picks up the money, there might be an opportunity. Shi Xiaotian did as she was told, and sent a message to Gu Fei. Originally, her ideal situation was for him to reach out and catch the money bag. That would definitely give her an opportunity. Unfortunately, the money bag was thrown at his feet, but his eyes only took a quick glance at it before immediately returning to the 3 people. His shield was still protecting his body, and then he slowly crouched down to pick up the money. He definitely had to pick it up, because the system always refreshed the items left behind by players very quickly. However, the opportunity that everyone was looking forward to didn't appear. Chapter 352. Shi Xiaotian's tactic of throwing money at him didn't seem to create any opportunities. In short, Gu Fei just stood there and didn't move. Maybe he'll go and count the money. Shi Xiaotian imagined that the other party would make a lousy mistake. In the end, the other party just casually weighed the money bag in his hand and put it in his pocket. Shi Xiaotian's 300 gold coins were considered a consumption. Even if Gu Fei cut this person down, he wouldn't be able to get the money back. Gu Fei also showed a regretful expression, but it wasn't because of the opportunity that didn't appear, but because of Shi Xiaotian's wallet. He said to Shi Xiaotian regretfully, You shouldn't have given him money. This wasn't even a private chat, but directly said. This clearly conveyed a message to the other party. He obviously wasn't going to pay. After hearing Gu Fei's words, the other party's expression twisted fiercely. Speaking of which, have you ever imagined this situation? Gu Fei was still amused. Some people pay but some don't. What would you do then? The other party's expression continued to twist. Gu Fei seemed to have poked at his sore spot. It seemed that in his career as a robber, he had encountered this thorny problem before. It was most likely that he didn't handle it well, and it left a psychological scar. Capsize the boat, kill the person who didn't pay, and save the person who paid? Such honesty, he really didn't have the temperament of a robber. Looks like you're not going to pay? The person said through gritted teeth. Look, you paid 300 gold coins for nothing. You're going to fall into the water too. Gu Fei actually ignored him and spoke to Shi Xiaotian. Teleport move. But he suddenly chanted at the end of the sentence. This person was obviously experienced in dealing with such situations. Although Gu Fei rushed up faster than everyone else, the way he dealt with it was still the same. Shield in front of him, enter the water. Everything this guy said was not a bluff. He was indeed a good swimmer. No matter how strong an expert fell into the water, he was confident that he could fool them. Dual flame flash. He heard Gu Fei's chanting, but his body had already fallen out of the ship. He didn't jump, nor did he stretch in midair, nor did he prepare to plunge into the water with extraordinary momentum. He simply tilted his body, and at first glance, he looked like a person who had fallen into the water. Although the posture was ugly, it was the most efficient way to fall into the water. However, Gu Fei's agility was even faster. Dodge. When the incantation ended, the person who was trying to fall into the water found that there was heat coming from the direction he was leaning. When he looked down, he saw that Gu Fei's night streamer had come from an unbelievable angle to where he was about to fall. He was about to collide with the sword. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. His body had already fallen to the ground, and he could no longer control it. In the end, he could only look back. He saw that Gu Fei was also leaning towards the side of the ship. His sword had come out from a horizontal position. He had completely predicted what his opponent would do when he went into the water. Whether it was jumping, falling, or sliding, his body would eventually lean to the side. Gu Fei had grasped this fleeting opportunity and accurately struck out with his sword. Gu Fei's timing was also impeccable. Taking advantage of the fact that his opponent's body could no longer be stabilized, Gu Fei's sword arrived. Whether or not he could insta-kill his opponent was the only suspense. Although his opponent's shield was no longer of any use, a heavy-armored warrior's HP was still very high. Gu Fei's hand sank. His opponent had already fallen to his sword. If he had been insta-killed, he should have turned into a white light. This amount of HP should have disappeared very quickly. However, this was not the case. This warrior could see his own HP, and he knew how far away he was from death. At this moment, the stone in his heart had been lifted. He was just waiting for his body to fall into the water and capsize the ship. Then he would teach this arrogant mage a good lesson. In an instant, he had already arranged Gu Fei's fate. However, he had forgotten one thing. There were a total of 3 guests on his ship. His opponent was not only Gu Fei. Just as Gu Fei made his move, the 2 ladies also used their own attacks. Suddenly, a cloud of black fog appeared at the tip of the staff. After quickly shrinking, it had already imprinted on the warrior's body. The warrior had just slid past the tip of Gu Fei's sword. His head was already in the water. After taking this hit, he suddenly bloomed into a ball of white light on the surface of the water. Even Gu Fei was surprised by this. His left hand had already flashed with a blue light, but he was sure that he had not hit the guy yet. After the spell was retracted, Gu Fei turned back to look at the 2. Shi Xiaotian also turned her head to look at the vast expanse. She had a small bow in her hand. She had already knocked an arrow, but she did not have the time to shoot. After all, there were too many steps for an archer to take. In that instant, she could not complete a single shot. Kiss of death? You're a shadow priest. The knowledgeable Shi Xiaotian said to the vast expanse. The vast expanse nodded. Shadow priests referred to night priests. Priests changed classes at level 40. Just like knights, they were divided into light and night. Even the changes in nature were somewhat similar to knights. The first skill of a knight priest, Kiss of Death, was a super instant cast attack spell. Compared to the previous priests under level 40, who could only follow a party, with this new skill, a knight priest could be said to have the ability to train alone. However, the original recovery skills of a priest would be greatly weakened after changing to a knight priest. As a result, the current position of a knight priest was rather awkward, especially in a party. In terms of damage output, a single Kiss of Death couldn't compare to other classes. In terms of recovery, the effect was much worse than a normal priest, let alone a light priest who could strengthen their recovery skills after changing to a light priest. Perhaps you would think that a class that could both attack and recover wasn't bad. However, in a truly efficient party, each character had their own role. There was no need for this kind of all-purpose character. The game promised that as levels increased and the skills of the class improved, the position of a knight priest would change. However, at the moment, a knight priest was a symbol of loneliness. Many players who chose to become a knight priest felt regret, but they could only grit their teeth and persevere while looking forward to the arrival of spring. It was common for a girl to choose the cleric class, but it was rare for her to choose the loneliest knight cleric class. Therefore, Shi Xiaotian was quite surprised when he found out that the girl was a shadow cleric. Priests were the support class that Gu Fei didn't understand the most, so he didn't know the position of a knight priest in the game. He only knew that Boundless Mang had helped him a lot, so he nodded his head to express his thanks. I say, you didn't seem to need to wait for an opportunity to attack, did you? Why didn't you just kill him right away? Shi Xiaotian felt quite pained at losing 300 gold for nothing. I was waiting. Gu Fei said. Waiting for what? Waiting for my PK value. I was originally 29, but it should drop to 28 in less than 2 minutes, so I wanted to wait until I was 28 before attacking. Otherwise, it would jump back to 30, and I would have to restart the timer. TSK, how troublesome. Being chased by a group of system guards wasn't a pleasant experience. Although Gu Fei had successfully dealt with it, he didn't want to experience it again. If it was only one or two, then luring them out to fight would be quite enjoyable, but unfortunately, they were all in groups. Hearing this, Shi Xiaotian could only lament her 300 gold even more. It was basically a waste of money. Why didn't you say so earlier? She could only say resentfully. That person died, so we have to row the boat ourselves. Gu Fei said as he stood at the back of the boat, grabbed the 2 oars, and shook them twice, causing the boat to spin in place. It doesn't seem as simple as I thought. Gu Fei wiped away his sweat, then shook the oars and spun them twice. Let me try. Shi Xiaotian also came over, tried it twice, and also spun in place, but the direction was the opposite of what Gu Fei had done. You're left-handed, Gu Fei concluded. Then Boundless Mang also tried it, and it was still spinning, making the 3 want to vomit. This problem seems a bit serious, Gu Fei said. The 2 girls were silent. That guy might as well use this method to threaten us. Gu Fei complained. Take off the oars and row yourself, don't row anymore. Shi Xiaotian said. Anyone who had rowed in the park would know how to do this, so the 2 of them, one on the left and one on the right, struggled to row the 2 oars. The small boat pushed away the waves, and a cool wind blew in their faces, reflecting Gu Fei's sad face on the surface of the water. Compared to the robber rowing the oars, the current speed was really not optimistic. These 2 oars were a bit too long for them to row by hand, and it wasn't easy to handle. And the vast surface of the water, at this time, looked endless. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to the 3's morale. Where should we go? The 3 of them didn't even know where their destination was. Ask those guys on the boat, and follow their coordinates. We can't go wrong. Shi Xiaotian said. Must you use the word chase? I don't think there's a boat slower than us in this world. Gu Fei said. Not necessarily. When I saw them leave the dock, they didn't move very fast. The system is always a bit more shameless. Shi Xiaotian said. In this time, they had already asked for the coordinates from the Boundless Mang, and in that direction, the boat worked hard to move forward. Chapter 353. As we got used to the oars and improved our rowing skills, the The boat's speed gradually increased. Moreover, it was getting faster and faster. We couldn't help but express our gratitude towards the system's exhaustion. The three of us taking turns to rest was actually just a formality. No one felt tired at all. Gradually, the boat was no longer pushing against the waves, but rather riding the wind and breaking the waves. Watching the water splashing behind us from the bow of the boat, Gufei repeatedly nodded his head. Perhaps we really can catch up to the system's big boat. The waterway in front of us was still a vast expanse. Although we couldn't see the big boat, we also couldn't see any land. This more or less meant that the other players in the clouds were still drifting on the water. Perhaps we can even surpass them and reach Waterside City first. Gufei began to take a yard after taking an inch. However, everyone really liked taking a yard after taking an inch. Drifting on the water was indeed very boring, not to mention having to personally row the boat. That was something only children would feel excited about. At this moment, Boundless Mang, who had just switched hands to rest, was stretching his body at the bow of the boat. He suddenly saw a shadow moving in the mist in front of him. He immediately turned his head and said to the other two in excitement, "There seems to be something in front." "What is it?" The two of them had originally been rowing with all their strength. At this moment, they immediately stretched their heads. Everyone saw that indistinct shadow. "Oh, it's so small. It doesn't seem to be land." Shi Xiaotian was the first to be disappointed. With the boat's current speed, their desire to catch up to the big boat had already faded. Hurrying to land was more important. However, as they continued to approach, the indistinct shadow became increasingly clear. The three of them could even clearly see its movement. It was moving in the opposite direction of their boat. Immediately after, the same shadow quietly appeared in the mist one after another. It gradually moved and gradually became clearer. "It's a boat." The first shadow that was discovered was now completely clear. It was a small boat, similar to the one that the three of them were on. If the first shadow was a boat, then the other shadows were naturally also boats. Standing at the bow of the boat, Boundless Mang counted 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Currently, there were already 5 boats. They didn't rule out the possibility that there were more in the mist. What are they doing? The three of them curiously sized up the incoming boats. They already had a bad premonition in their hearts. Looking at the direction they were moving in, it was very likely that they were coming for them. The ship was closing in. It was the same boat as the three of them, with 4 people on each boat. Of course, the other party didn't paddle with their hands. Instead, they installed the oars at the stern of the boat, and had a person paddle it by hand. The other 3 were fully equipped and stood with bright eyes. The first ship was also at the speed of breaking through the waves. It headed straight for the boat of the 3 of them. It did not slow down at all, nor did it seem to have any intention of turning. The 3 of them wanted to evade, but unfortunately, the 3 of them were already very familiar with rowing the boat in a straight line. However, controlling the turn and direction of the boat was still as sloppy as before. Not only did they fail to steer the boat away, they even turned around and exposed their side to the other party. Aside from the oarsmen, the other 3 people had already crouched down, their hands gripping the edge of the boat tightly. How could Gufei and the other 2 suspect what the other party was going to do? No one could predict what would happen after this collision. If it was just a violent shake, they might be safe if they held on tightly. However, looking at the momentum of the other party, once the boat was overturned or damaged, it would be too troublesome. What was worse was that even if Gufei flew onto the boat and killed those people in the blink of an eye, the collision between the boats was still unavoidable, because no one could stop the inertia from happening. At this moment, there was no time to waste. Gufei's hand reached into his pocket. He pulled out a coil of rope. There were many coils of rope in Gufei's pocket, but this one was a little different. There was a hook tied to the end of the rope. Just like his pitchfork, this iron hook was also a quest item that Gufei had obtained after completing a certain quest. Thus, it was made into a simple flying hook. This was also a type of ancient weapon with a long history. Most people might think that this was the favorite of a gentleman on a beam, flying over eaves and climbing walls. In fact, the main use of this thing was to defend a city during war. Today, of course, this thing could no longer be used in war, but in the Kung Fu system, it could still be used as a soft weapon. At this time, Gu Fei grabbed the coil of rope and quickly threw it out, hitting the edge of the other boat. "Quick!" Gu Fei hurriedly called out to the two girls. The two of them reacted and reached out to grab the end of the rope. The three of them stepped on the planks of the boat and pulled hard. The boat that was hooked swayed and lost its direction, but the boat that the three of them were on borrowed strength to quickly move forward. The boat that was rushing straight at this time couldn't turn back in time. It swept past the stern of Gu Fei's boat. The two boats kept colliding with each other, and both were shaking. "Hold on tight," Gu Fei called out to the two girls. The two girls didn't need his reminder. They reached out and grabbed the edge of the boat. On the other hand, Gu Fei's body swayed left and right under the boat's shaking, but he didn't fall. "How did you do it?" The two girls were very surprised. "Lower body skill." Gu Fei smiled. To say something like 1,000-kilogram drop was too unrealistic. The so-called lower body mainly referred to the stability and balance of the lower body. The strength of the lower body was indeed very important, but it was mainly used when the two sides wrestled. For example, in a basketball court, when defending the inner court, lower body strength was needed. But right now, Gu Fei was only stabilizing his body in the shaking of the boat. So even though his strength wasn't that great, it was enough. After dodging the collision of the other boat, the small boat slowly drifted in the direction of the boat that Gu Fei had hooked. There was no need to worry about a collision between the two because even if they did, the force wouldn't be too great. At this time, Gu Fei raised his sword and threw a falling flame wheel at the small boat. The four guys on the boat immediately stood together. One of them raised his shield above his head. Gu Fei's falling flame wheel was very slow. The other side even waited for a while before the flame wheel fell. It was clear that the warrior with the shield was also shocked by the damage of Gu Fei's spell. But no matter what, the four of them survived. One of the priests immediately started to cast a healing spell. Gu Fei saw that this trick didn't work, so he cast 1,000 layers of flames. It was too difficult to place the shield on the boat, and then stand on it. Who would have thought that the other side didn't do that? The four of them jumped into the water without hesitation. The 1,000 layers of flames burned as usual, but the part above the water was weakened. It should have lasted for 5 seconds, but after 2 or 3 seconds, it was extinguished. The small boat, on the other hand, was burning fiercely, but after 5 seconds, it returned to its original color. The four guys stuck their heads out of the water and skillfully climbed up the side of the boat. They continued to form a group of 4. The warrior raised his shield high and the priest continuously cast healing spells. Their expressions were calm. Apart from these two professions, the other two were an archer and a mage. Both professions had long-range attacks. However, the fact that Gu Fei had made the first move put them in a very passive position. They had to pose, jump into the water, and climb onto the boat. At this moment, the boat was shaking violently. It was not easy for them to stand still, and it was difficult for them to make accurate attacks. The archer grabbed the side of the boat with one hand, so he definitely couldn't shoot an arrow with one hand. The mage, on the other hand, waved his staff and cast an ice tornado. As the boat swayed, his body also swayed. Although he didn't want to swing his staff with his hand, unfortunately, his hand was also a part of his body. As he swayed left and right, the ice tornado twisted into an S shape, and it even trembled. The mage saw that it was too embarrassing, so he quickly retracted his mana, and the ice tornado disappeared just like that. Gu Fei glanced at the current situation. The boat in front was shaking, and because of the collision between the two boats, the boat that brushed past the stern didn't stop at this time. The people on the boat steadied themselves and turned the boat around. Otherwise, it would directly sail to the dock where Gu Fei and the others boarded the boat. There were 3 other boats, and at this time, they were fiercely rushing towards Gu Fei's boat. The situation was dangerous, and there was no time to think. Gu Fei swung his sword, and with a flash of lightning, an electric wall was erected on the water, and it spanned across the bow of the 3 boats. The power of this fire magic seemed to be weakened on water, but the lightning magic was not affected. Instead, when the water rippled, water droplets repeatedly splashed on the electric net, causing electricity to splatter in all directions and making loud crackling sounds. The picture and sound effects increased the momentum. The players on the 3 boats didn't know what this thing was, but looking at the atmosphere, they really didn't dare to collide with it. At this time, the electric wall wouldn't move, but the boats were moving, and the people on the boats, it was equivalent to carrying them towards the electric wall. This small broken boat didn't have the equipment to stop when it wanted to, like a car. The players at the stern of the boat were already desperately rowing in the opposite direction. It was a pity that they had rushed too fiercely before, and now it was time to pay the price. Rowing in the opposite direction caused the speed of the boat to decrease, but it still continued to move forward. The players on the boats kept retreating, and finally, the 4 players on the first boat gathered at the stern. That boat seriously lost its balance, and in an instant, it flipped upside down, and the 4 players fell into the water. When the players on the other 2 boats saw this, they didn't dare to retreat too much. The boat couldn't stop, and the electric wall was in front of them. If they didn't want to collide with it, what else could they do? They had to take the initiative to jump into the water. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The 8 players jumped into the water one after another, and watched as their boats swam away. A few of them swam to chase after the boat, but the electric wall was still in front of them, and they still had to go around it. Needless to say, it was very annoying. The electric wall had achieved such results, and it was really worthy of celebration. Although Gu Fei's mana was exhausted, there was a vast expanse of the field. With a wave of his staff, Gu Fei had already cast Mana Sacrifice. Gu Fei raised his finger and used teleportation. With a whoosh, he flew in front of the boat that was less than 5 meters away, and was still shaking. Dual flame flash flash. Gu Fei slashed out with his sword. At such a critical moment, Gu Fei definitely didn't care about whether his PK value was 28, 29, or 30. Chapter 354. The Pitiful Team of 4. The warrior was still holding his shield up high, pretending to be a pillar supporting the sky. Gu Fei flashed and appeared in front of him in an instant. This guy wanted to take down his shield to protect his front, but he found that Gu Fei was too close to him. He was so close that if he swung his shield down with both arms, he wouldn't be able to hit Gu Fei, so he could only hug him. Hesitating in front of Gu Fei was naturally a dead end. After Gu Fei's sword was completed, the warrior, the archer and the mage beside him were all dead. The priest was only safe for a while by hiding behind the 3 people. Once the 3 people were dead, Gu Fei took special care of him, slashing his head and face. Shi Xiaotian was also having a lot of fun at this time. The 12 people were all in the water, and now 4 of them were trying hard to overturn their boat, while the other 8 were trying hard to chase their drifting boat. Shi Xiaotian pulled his bow and arrows, trying hard to bully this group of people who had fallen into the water. Speaking of which, these 8 people's swimming skills were considered not bad, but they weren't as excessive as the white stripe in the waves in the novels. They couldn't dodge the arrows shot by Shi Xiaotian in the water, and all of them hit their heads. It was very embarrassing. The boat that was initially riding the wind and waves finally turned around, but found that the scene was very different from when they sailed past. For boats, 3 people were swimming in the water, and there was no one in the water on the other boat, and there was no one on the boat. Only the mage in black was standing alone, and at this time, he had already turned around, pointed his sword at them, and immediately chanted, "Dodge!" The mage on the boat shouted. From Gu Fei's technique, it could be seen that this spell was the 1,000 layers of flames of the cinder tree. Although nowadays mages cast spells in a low voice, so you couldn't hear what it was, but from the technique, experienced mages could still determine what it was. The heavenly wheel of fire was pointed high, while the 1,000 layers of flames of the cinder tree was pointed low. At this moment, Gu Fei's sword was pointing at their feet. Naturally, it was the fire tree 1,000 layers flame. If it was just an ordinary mage's spell, it wouldn't be a big deal if they clenched their teeth and endured it. However, Gu Fei's magic power was astonishing. Previously, the warrior who raised his shield to block Gu Fei's heavenly fire had experienced it firsthand. So, when Gu Fei used the 1,000 layers of flames of the cinder tree, they jumped into the water without hesitation. The four on the other side had already received information that this person's spells couldn't be blocked. Seeing that the fire 3000 layers flames had arrived, they also jumped very freely. Unfortunately, Gu Fei didn't release anything this time. He was just bluffing. If this was a normal land battle, it wouldn't be a big deal. At most, they would be tricked and run a few more steps. However, this was a battle on the water. If they were tricked like this, the consequences would be dire. It was not an easy task to climb back into the boat after entering the water. Moreover, the boat was very shaky and unstable. The previous boat had already demonstrated this awkwardness. So this time, the four of them did not board the boat. Instead, they stepped on the water and attacked Gu Fei. The mages cast spells, and the archers shot arrows. Gu Fei could dodge arrows, but there was no place to dodge a mage's area of effect spell on the boat. However, an ordinary mage's spell was nothing. Gu Fei brandished his sword, wanting to bombard the enemy mage with spells. But the enemy warrior had already covered himself with a shield, and Gu Fei's lightning spell was just a hair's breadth away from hitting the shield. Gu Fei promptly used a real fire 3000 layers flames. This skill seemed to be weakened on the water, but it could burn a little bit. Who would have thought that the opponents would see through Gu Fei's technique and promptly bury their heads underwater? Dodging the fire 3000 layers flames, which couldn't be used on land, was finally realized on the water. These guys actually hid under the fire 3000 layers flames. Gu Fei was speechless as he looked at them. After the fire was extinguished, their heads resurfaced, and they continued to attack him while baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Just when the four-man team thought that Gu Fei had run out of tricks, Gu Fei's flying hook shot out again, and then he suddenly pulled back his arm. "Hey!" The mage of the four-man team shouted as he drank some water. Gu Fei's flying hook actually hooked onto his robe. At this time, Gu Fei forcefully pulled back. Gu Fei's boat swayed, but the mage had already been pulled out by Gu Fei. Gu Fei at least had an accessory that increased strength, so ordinary mages couldn't compare to him. But the other side still had a warrior, so he hurriedly stretched out his hand to pull the mage back. Unfortunately, this short moment was enough for Gu Fei. He pointed his sword with his right hand and cast another lightning spell. A bright light struck down, hitting the mage who was half above the water. The warrior grabbed over and caught a ball of white light. Gu Fei's left hand hurriedly pulled again, and the flying hook flew out of the water and returned to his hand. The four-man team was enraged. But at this time, they had completely run out of tricks. Other than the mage's area of effect attack, other attacks were easily dodged by Gu Fei. The group of swimmers on the other side, under the torment of Shi Xiaotian's arrows, also formed a small team. The warrior swam in front with his shield, while the others hid behind. They had actually given up on chasing their boat, and wanted to swim directly to Shi Xiaotian's boat. After dealing with the mage and the four-man team, Gu Fei temporarily ignored the other three. He looked back at the situation, and immediately swung his sword again. "Fuck, be careful." The three-man team saw everything clearly. This wave of Gu Fei's sword formed another electric wall on the water. The two teams of 8 people hid behind their shields and swam foolishly, completely unaware of this. At this time they seemed to hear a companion shouting, "Be careful." But they didn't know if it was directed at them. While they were thinking, the two warriors in front of them had already pushed their shields against the electric wall, twitching a strong twitch. Similarly, on land, this may have looked a little funny, but in the water, these two warriors twitched like they were drowning. Gu Fei saw that his heaven's flame will had just finished its cooldown, and hurriedly raised his sword and used it. The warriors on this side were no longer able to raise their shields to cover, and the remaining mages, archers, and priests hurriedly fled in different directions. Gu Fei's magic was indeed very slow, but unfortunately because they were in the water, swimming was not as fast as running. In the end, when Gu Fei's heaven's flame will fell, it smashed into 4 people. 2 archers and 1 mage died on the spot, and the other priests survived. This group of pirates finally realized that this was no longer a problem of how to continue robbing these 3 people, but a problem of whether or not they could survive this fight. The 4 people who were still struggling to capsize were the only 4 people who were still intact. When they realized that their companions had been killed and scattered, They finally stopped their current meaningless actions. These 4 people crawled to the back of the boat and carefully sized up the situation in front of them. The 3 of them held onto their shields and wanted to cry but had no tears. The 2 warriors pushed their shields against the electric wall and were about to die from drinking too much water. 1 mage and 2 priests, they had just survived a catastrophe and were currently in a state of panic. Gu Fei saw that his PK value had jumped to 36 and was in pain, so he didn't have the heart to continue killing. After teleporting back to their boat, the 2 girls chose to avoid looking at him. Gu Fei majestically stood at the bow of the boat and looked around. A bunch of people who had fallen into the water chose to avoid looking at him. The archer hiding behind the boat mustered up his courage to sneakily shoot an arrow, but was struck down by Gu Fei's sword. Gu Fei took the opportunity to shoot a flaming 3,000 layers flame towards them. The 4 of them were so scared that they immediately dove into the water, and even after the flames were extinguished, they still didn't dare to show their heads. Only when their HP started to drop did they dare to resurface. The 3 people's boat had long since rowed far away, and only their empty boat was left. Lonely, lonely. The survivors swam, and each climbed onto the boat, and looked at each other with their bodies dripping with water. For the first time, they felt that the water here was so cold. Is there anyone chasing us? Boundless Mang, who was rowing the boat, asked Gu Fei, who had run to the back of the boat to pay attention to those guys. No. Gu Fei shook his head. Who is it? What are they doing? Boundless Mang asked. The PK had come to an end, but the reason for this PK was not clear. From the beginning to the end, the 2 sides didn't say a word. It should be a robbery. Shi Xiaotian analyzed. And the method is very similar to the guy from before. With their profession, they are obviously long-range attackers, but they actually wanted to crash into us. They probably want to give us a show of strength, let us know their advantage on the water, and then force us to pay the toll. As for whether they will let us go or kill us, Shi Xiaotian said, and glanced at Gu Fei. A guy with a high PK value like you is the favorite of robbers. They probably won't let you go so easily. Robber group. Gu Fei muttered. He suddenly thought of Remnant Dreams group. Their group was a large group that spanned across the main city. What relationship did the pirates of Waterfront City have with them? Thinking of Remnant Dreams' death? Shi Xiaotian actually saw through Gu Fei's thoughts. I'm also thinking that it's very likely that they're together. Don't you hang out with them? Never heard of them? Gu Fei said. No. I don't really understand the situation in Cloud City. Their system is very professional, like a company. Shi Xiaotian said. What are you talking about? Boundless Mang became more and more confused. Thus, Gu Fei briefly introduced this evil organization. TCH, I thought it was something big. Isn't this kind of thing very normal? Boundless Mang, who was born in Moonlit Night City, obviously didn't think this was a big deal. In Moonlit Night City, even a small organization like the Black Hand Mercenary Group dared to rob. The players there often changed their roles between killing and being killed, robbing and being robbed. That kid from before should be together with this group of people. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to suddenly know that there's a ship of people on the water, right? Gu Fei continued to analyze. Yeah, and that guy, it's very likely that he came out to hunt. Shi Xiaotian said. Hunt. This term was too technical. Gu Fei and Boundless Mang didn't understand. They robbed themselves but not the organization. In their system, this kind of behavior is called hunting. It's something that they can't say to their superiors, but tacitly understand to their subordinates. Shi Xiaotian said. Chapter 355. Haha, you seem to know quite a bit. Gu Fei laughed dryly. Shi Xiaotian ignored the sarcasm in his words and continued. If it really is this group of people, then our troubles are far from over. Especially if their superiors give them orders, it's equivalent to giving you a task at work. If you don't complete it, then your salary and bonus will be deducted. So they'll do everything in their power to take care of you. This is much more motivating than normal players PKNG each other because of a single glance. I've been waiting for this day for a long time, Gu Fei said sincerely. He liked it when people came to rob him. Not only would he be able to kill people in a justifiable manner, but he might also be able to gain the reputation of being a righteous person. Why not? Violent flight. Shi Xiaotian looked at Gu Fei, who was standing at the bow of the boat, and wiping the dark night light sword. He was speechless. With suspicions and guesses about these pirates, the boat of the three continued to move forward unsteadily. Finally, a large patch of hazy fog appeared in front of them. After the three of them looked carefully, they confirmed that it was land and were quite relieved. We're finally here. Boundless Meng let out a long sigh. Shi Xiaotian looked at Gu Fei and asked, "What's your PK value?" 36. Gu Fei replied. Of course, he was also very worried about this problem. There haven't been any guards coming to take you. Shi Xiaotian was puzzled. It had been a while since the battle had ended. If the guards had rushed forward, they should have already appeared in front of Gu Fei. I don't know. Gu Fei sighed. No one had ever experienced the treatment that a player with a PK value of 30 or more would receive. There was limited information in this area. There should be a limit to how far the guards will go. They won't chase us to the ends of the earth. Boundless Meng said. Gu Fei nodded and said, "When we get ashore, I'll immediately go and wash my PK value." Good luck. The two girls said sincerely. So the boat kept moving forward and forward until it finally broke through all the mist. Everything in front of them became clear. The three of them saw an island in the middle of a large body of water. They saw the tall walls of Waterside City on the island, and a group of guards boarding a ship at the pier. Just by looking at the design of the boat, one could tell that it was different. At the very least, it wasn't as crude as the player-made boat that Gu Fei and the others were on. Gu Fei's craft seemed to be based on the fishing boats of Jiangnan, which was a little out of place with the Western-style background of the game. On the other hand, the ship that appeared now looked like a small three-masted dhow popular in the Mediterranean in the Middle Ages. This kind of boat could even cross the entire Atlantic Ocean in the game's age of discovery. How could Gu Fei's fishing boat compare? After the group of guards boarded the ship with a huala sound, the ship's sail was raised. Regardless of whether there was wind or not, the ship was already aggressively sailing towards Gu Fei's small boat. It seems to be directed at me. Gu Fei smiled bitterly. The two women looked at him expressionlessly. Was there even a need to say this? Looking at the majestic appearance of the guards and the ripple-shaped emblem on their shields, which was different from the other main cities, they were obviously the guards of Waterfront. Quickly retreat. Boundless Meng called out, and the small boat began to turn around. Can we go around them and rush onto land? Gu Fei asked. On land they might be able to contend with them, but on water, this group of guards would perform an earth-splitting slash technique. No matter what, they wouldn't be able to dodge it. Difficult. Boundless Meng, who was controlling the boat, observed the movements of the enemy's boat, and came to this conclusion. This boat moved quickly and was even more nimble. It was unknown if the system had shamelessly made them break the rules. Let's run first. Maybe once we leave the main city of Waterside City, they won't chase after us. Boundless Meng adjusted the boat's direction and rowed with all his might. Shi Xiaotian was also working hard, but the real culprit, Gu Fei, was standing at the stern as if nothing had happened. They were about to reach land, but because of a wanted criminal on board, it seemed as if they were being denied entry. The three women were quite depressed. What was even more depressing was that the speed of their small boat was too small compared to the triangular sailboat. The triangular sailboat was constantly closing in. Boundless Meng and Shi Xiaotian didn't seem to be rowing at all. The sailboat was much larger and taller than their small boat. At this moment, when it arrived in front of them, the three could only stretch their necks and look up. The guards on the boat had already arrived at the bow. It seemed that once the distance was right, they were really prepared to perform the earth-splitting slash technique. Seeing the eager appearance of the guards, Gu Fei suddenly thought of a plan. Can you two swim? Gu Fei asked. The two women nodded. When they attack, you two jump into the water, Gu Fei said. What about you? The two women asked. I have another way, Gu Fei said. The two women didn't have time to ask because the sailboat was already very close. Some of the guards on the boat had already risen from the ground. Just as Gu Fei expected, these guys always used the earth-splitting slash to complete flying and jumping movements. Jump! Gu Fei yelled. The two women jumped into the water, one on the left and one on the right. The guard's earth-splitting slash could even break through the roof, so what could a small wooden boat do? The first guard who jumped into the water directly pierced through the bottom of the boat, performing the phenomenon of piercing through. The second, third, and fourth guards were lining up to jump. What about Gu Fei? When the guards flew over and the two women jumped into the water, Gu Fei used teleportation and flashed to the side of the water. At the same time, he threw out a flying hook that he had already prepared. Although he quickly fell into the water, the flying hook accurately hooked onto the edge of the sailboat. Gu Fei tightly held onto the rope. He felt like he was gliding in the water while holding his breath and trying his best to climb up. If Gu Fei was on the boat, the guards would chase him. If Gu Fei was in the water, the guards would also chase him into the water. Nothing could slow down the soldiers who only knew their mission and would press forward with indomitable will. They continued to dive, but of course, they weren't aiming at the boat, but at Gu Fei in the water. It was still the earth-splitting slash, but no one could hit Gu Fei's head. Gu Fei swung the rope in the water, so he was still moving. In addition, when the earth-splitting slash hit the water, its area of effect was weakened. After all, the earth-splitting slash wasn't the water-splitting slash. Gu Fei was overjoyed as he listened to the plop sounds behind him one after another. His plan was very successful. These guards were just as useless as he had predicted. Finally, Gu Fei swung to the side of the boat. At the same time, he finally climbed up the rope and onto the water. Gu Fei let out a huge sigh of relief and looked back. The guards who had fallen into the water were also very good at swimming and were enthusiastically swimming towards him. Gu Fei didn't pay any attention to them. At this time, he was already close to the hull of the boat. He pulled on the rope with his hands and kicked with his feet, making it easier for him to climb up. With his nimble limbs, Gu Fei was soon halfway up. When he looked down, some of the guards who had caught up to him had also grabbed onto the rope and climbed up. These guards can still learn. Gu Fei was surprised. He had already climbed the remaining half of the boat. After jumping onto the boat, he cruelly cut the rope. Another plop sound. The guards fell back into the water. Gu Fei leaned on the edge of the boat and looked. The guards were at their wits' end in the water. Gu Fei finally let out a sigh of relief. At first, he was quite worried that the system would be shameless enough to let these guys use earth-shattering slash while stepping on water. Now it seemed that they wouldn't. After admiring the helpless struggle of the guards for a while, Gu Fei finally remembered that Shi Xiaotian and Boundless Mang were also in the water. He hurriedly ran to the other side to take a look. The two girls were indeed floating on the water. Over here! Gu Fei shouted at the two girls. He guessed that the guards wouldn't be able to understand his direct signal. The two girls swam towards the sailboat. Gu Fei threw down the rope and helped the two onto the boat. After jumping onto the boat, the two immediately climbed to the other side of the boat to admire the guards who were struggling in the water. Such powerful guards. At this time, they had fallen into a situation where they couldn't advance or retreat. The three of them felt extremely happy. Bullying the system was actually more satisfying than bullying other players. After all, the system was a high and mighty god. How do I sail this boat? After the fun, the three of them began to study the sailboat. The three of them quickly found the steering cabin. The steering wheel. Haha, now it's easy. Shi Xiaotian rushed up to fiddle with it. What do you think the boat uses to move forward? Boundless Mang's expression was like that of a scientist. Gu Fei pointed at the sail above her head. But there's no wind right now. Boundless Mang said. You'll lose if you get serious with the system. Gu Fei said as he leaned on the side of the boat to admire the guards who had fallen into the water. He really couldn't get tired of looking at them. At the same time, Shi Xiaotian's research on sailing had made a breakthrough. She finally controlled the boat to change direction. The shamelessness of the system's sailboat was really endearing. They didn't know what it was using as its driving force, but it was always moving forward in the direction of the bow. At this time, Boundless Mang, who was bored, climbed to the observation deck at the bow of the boat and shouted for the two to come up. There was a telescope on the observation deck. The kind that could be retracted. Look over there. Boundless Mang pushed the telescope to the two of them and pointed in a certain direction. Without the telescope, the two of them could already see the shadow over there. With the experience of sailing for a night, the two of them immediately determined that it was another handmade fishing boat. After holding the telescope, they could naturally see it more clearly. There were 5 boats with different people on them, and they were all heading in the direction of land. It's those guys. Gu Fei, who had used the telescope, announced. I'll go turn around. Shi Xiaotian excitedly jumped down from the observation deck. What are you doing? Gu Fei shouted. Attacking the forces of evil. The girl had already rushed to the steering cabin to turn around. Look over here. Boundless Mang adjusted the angle of the telescope for Gu Fei to see. Gu Fei stretched his neck over to take a look and was speechless. It was the group of system guards. They were currently swimming in the water and stubbornly chasing after Gu Fei's boat. Gu Fei was very touched by their dedication to their work. Turn 180 degrees. The target is straight ahead. Shi Xiaotian shouted from the steering cabin. The triangular sailboat ferociously charged towards the 5 small fishing boats. Chapter 356. The water body was still vast and boundless as far as the eye could see. Gu Fei's boat was being chased by the city guards. In front of them, they were about to meet the pirates. It seemed like they were being attacked from both sides, but the 3 of them were overjoyed. The boat was truly riding the wind and breaking the waves. Needless to say, the guards were swimming. No matter how fast they swam, they couldn't compare to the boat. As for the pirates in front of them, the distance between them and the boat was getting shorter and shorter. At this moment, these guys could clearly see the approaching boat. They all suspected that their eyes were playing tricks on them. The players of Waterside City weren't unfamiliar with this type of boat. Throughout the year, there were only a few boats docked at Waterside City's pier. Players couldn't control them, and they weren't involved in any quests. They had never set foot in the water before. But now, the boat had suddenly left the shore, and had even sailed so far away. These guys couldn't figure out what was going on. Could it be that we've bumped into some mysterious quest? These guys were actually having sweet dreams. But no matter what, the boat was heading straight for them. They couldn't be rammed by it. The 5 boats hurriedly dodged to the side. They're scattering. On the observation deck, Boundless Mang observed with her binoculars as she shouted at Shi Xiaotian. Direction. Shi Xiaotian yelled. Turn left by about 10 degrees. Boundless Mang replied. Understood. Shi Xiaotian replied loudly. Shi Xiaotian controlled the boat to change direction. But she was only a newbie. How could she accurately say 10 degrees? Moreover, Boundless Mang wasn't a professional surveyor. Her estimate of 10 degrees was very exaggerated. Thus, after turning around, Boundless Mang immediately yelled. It's too much. Turn back a bit more. Shi Xiaotian hurriedly turned back while asking loudly. How is it? How is it? Standing at the bow of the boat, Gu Fei watched as the 2 girls yelled loudly, causing the boat to sway left and right as if it was about to fall apart. The pirates also saw the sailboat suddenly tremble left and right. For a moment, they couldn't understand what was going on. Just as they were wondering if this was some sort of super quest, the black-robed mage at the bow of the ship clearly appeared before their eyes. It's that guy. Almost everyone let out this cry. They didn't have a good impression of the Dao. They were just curious as to how the mage managed to get his hands on the Dao. After all, these pirates had been drooling over these Dao for a long time. From the looks of it, the players still had a way to get their hands on this ship. Even at a time like this, these guys were still thinking about it. Shi Xiaotian was already charging toward them with a menacing aura. Although it didn't directly collide with a boat, the difference between an ant and an elephant was like the difference between an ant and an elephant. A small bump from the side was enough to flip a boat over. Well done. The vast Mang gave Shi Xiaotian a thumbs up. At this time, the waves created by the sailboat were enough to cause the boats that hadn't been hit to shake violently. 3 people lost their balance and fell into the water before they could grab hold of anything. Shi Xiaotian continued to control the sailboat, hitting people as well as boats. These pirates had always bullied the weak on the water. Today they finally met someone stronger. They couldn't do anything even if they were bullied by the sailboat. The vast Mang 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 stood on the observation deck and gave orders blindly. Shi Xiaotian controlled the boat to turn in circles. After messing around, not a single one of the pirates could stand on the boat. The luckier ones were still able to hold on to the boat after falling into the water. The unluckier ones had long since been swept away by the waves created by the sailboat. At this time, the fearless guards had also caught up. However, when faced with the waves created by Shi Xiaotian, they couldn't control their bodies. The waves sent them flying everywhere. The people who fell into the water were in a miserable state. The 3 people on the sailboat were also in a sorry state. Shi Xiaotian was a newbie. How could a boat change directions so frequently? Though the waves caused a great deal of trouble for the men in the water, their vessel suffered a great deal as well. And because of the size of the vessel, the extent of the rocking was even more dreadful. Even though Gu Fei had trained hard in his lower body skills, there was always a limit to everything. At this time, his sense of balance could no longer keep him steady. After a moment of carelessness, he slipped and became a glider on the deck. He rolled left and right, and from time to time, he even rolled forward and backward. In the driver's seat, Shi Xiaotian had a different look. At first, she held on tightly to the rudder, but in the end, she accidentally let go during one of the violent shakes. She was knocked around in the steering cabin, and her head was dizzy. But the most miserable thing was still the vast expanse of grass. She was standing high up on the observation deck, but one time when the ship shook, she was thrown out. Fortunately, the girl reacted quickly and reached out to the observation deck. At this time, her body was swaying along with the ship, and she was struggling to hold on. What was worse was that this situation did not seem to have an end. Don't forget that the ship was constantly moving on its own with an unknown mysterious force. At this time, Shi Xiaotian's rudder was pointing in an unknown direction. In short, the ship kept shaking and spinning in the same place, and the more it shook, the more it shook. Gu Fei slid from the left side of the deck to the right side, from the bow to the stern. At a glance, it seemed that if this continued, the sailboat would no longer be a sailboat, and it would capsize. At this time, the most important thing was, of course, to stabilize the rudder and control it to the right position. Of course, there was no hope for the vast expanse of grass on the observation deck. It would be good if she could take care of herself and not fly to some unknown corner. Controlling the rudder, of course, depended on Shi Xiaotian, who was still playing the human bumper car in the driver's seat. As Gu Fei continued to glide on the deck, he craned his neck to look in the direction of the driver's seat. He thought to himself that this girl was confused because of the collision, and he should think of a way to take measures. At one time, when he passed by the door of the driver's seat, Gu Fei was about to shout a warning, but in the end, he saw Shi Xiaotian's figure fly out of the door with a whoosh, and the 2 of them collided. After the 2 of them flew out horizontally, before they could say a word, the ship tilted in a certain direction, and the 2 of them slid out again, one in front of the other, one behind the other. Seeing that there was no hope for this girl, Gu Fei had to rely on himself in the end. After sliding left and right for a few rounds, Gu Fei finally had an opportunity to pass by the driver's seat. Gu Fei had been waiting for this moment. Looking at the right opportunity, he teleported, and in a flash, he was already in the driver's seat. But even so, his body was not very stable, and after entering the driver's seat he was still floating. But Gu Fei's skills were much better than Shi Xiaotian's. With a stretch of his arm he had already grabbed the rudder, straightened his waist, stretched out his legs, and stepped on the other side of the wall, and his body was horizontal in the air. Awesome! At this time Gu Fei heard a shout. Looking out, he saw Shi Xiaotian giving him a thumbs up, and he had just swept past the deck in front of the driver's seat. Looking at the current shaking of the sailboat, Gu Fei really did not know which direction was the right one to turn the rudder, and he did not dare to make a move. But at this time, Gu Fei had already stabilized the rudder, and the sailboat continued to shake with the waves, and finally had a stable direction to move forward. In this way, as long as he persevered, the situation would be much better. Gu Fei jumped back to the ground by stepping on the wall. and continued to hold the rudder firmly with both hands. After judging that the bow seemed to be rotating to the left, he began to slowly turn the rudder in the opposite direction, bit by bit. The sailboat finally moved in a straight line, and as it sailed away from the area where the waves were blooming, the shaking became lighter and lighter. On the deck, Xiaotian finally stopped gliding and carefully stood up. After falling around for so long, although he did not die, it was inevitable that he was a little dizzy. In the driver's seat, Gufei did not dare to relax his grip on the rudder. He watched as Xiaotian got up and staggered forward on the deck until he reached the mast of the bow and began to climb up. After climbing to the observation deck, he pulled up the vast mang that was still hanging there. The two girls sat on the observation deck, gasping for breath. At this time they did not even have the strength to shout, so they sent a message to Gufei. "How is it?" "It's okay, it's under control," replied Gufei. The boat was getting steadier and steadier. "Where are the others?" Gufei asked the two on the observation deck. Then he saw Mang, who was in the vast expanse of the observation deck, stand up shakily, raise his binoculars and look around. "I don't know. I can't see it. Who knows where the waves have pushed them to?" The man replied in a vast and boundless manner. In her field of vision through the binoculars, she finally found two floating boats. "Let's take advantage of this time to go ashore." "Where is the land?" Gufei asked. 40 degrees to the left. The boundless wilderness began again. "I'll drive." Xiaotian seemed to have developed feelings for sailing. "Don't, you should rest for a while." Gufei still had lingering fears about the situation just now. After the sailboat turned around, it moved forward steadily. After carefully observing the vast and boundless surroundings, he said with certainty, "I really can't see anyone." "Forget about the players. The NPC guards definitely know where we are. They'll probably catch up soon," Xiaotian said. "What's there to chase? How can they swim as fast as the boat? They'll only get further and further away," Gufei said. Gufei welcomed this situation. This way, he would have the time to wash away these annoying PKs. The sailboat headed straight for the land, and nothing else happened. The shore of Waterside City was like a beach, with fine sand. The sun shone down, and unique aquatic monsters roamed the shore. Whether it was killing monsters or relaxing, this was a good place. It was considered a gathering place for players in Waterside City. Although it was almost dawn, there were still quite a few people. When they saw a dhow getting closer and closer, everyone's eyes widened. Just like the pirates, they recognized this boat. It was the same boat that hadn't moved for tens of thousands of years. Is it some kind of special mission? Everyone excitedly gathered at the shore, facing the sailing ship. In the control room of the boat, Gufei stuck his head out and asked the two girls, "Do you know how to stop the boat?" Chapter 357. More and more players gathered on the shoreline. Everyone stared at the approaching triangular sailboat with wide eyes. If they knew that the pilot of the boat had not found a way to stop the boat, they would definitely regret their decision to watch. Reality was often cruel. Gufei did not find anything in the cabin that looked like a break. After asking the two girls, he naturally did not get any answers. Helpless, Gufei could only choose to change direction as much as possible, and not charge directly into the players on the shoreline. Xiaotian and Boundless Mang also took measures. The two stood high up on the observation deck and waved at the players, gesturing for them to move. 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 The crowd on the shoreline was very excited. With the sound of the waves and the wind, no one could hear the two's shouts. However, the two's ferocious appearance attracted a lot of attention. After everyone's attention was focused on them, a sharpshooter with a pair of eagle eyes immediately shouted, "Beauties!" 2. Someone added, "What's going on?" Everyone fought to be the first to ask. The strong curiosity aroused an even stronger reaction from the crowd. Not only did no one move away, everyone took a few steps forward. Some people even stepped into the water fearlessly. After realizing that the sailboat was trying to change direction, everyone became even more vigilant. The boat is going to run. Everyone pointed at the boat and chased after the direction that Gufei had deliberately avoided. This was in accordance with the old saying, "Heaven's evil can be defied, but man's evil cannot be avoided." Gu Fei could no longer change direction. If he did, he would have to turn around and leave the shoreline. Seeing the players' enthusiasm, Gu Fei felt that if he turned around and left, they would be even more disappointed. Therefore, he did not care anymore. He walked out of the cabin and shouted at the two girls on the observation deck, "Hey, hurry up and get ready to run. We will definitely be surrounded later." Gu Fei had a lot of experience being surrounded, so he had good judgment. In this situation, no matter what happened to the boat, it would definitely be surrounded. "I'm coming." Shi Xiaotian was the first to climb down. "Hey," Gu Fei urged. It was a vast expanse of grass, but he didn't know what he was doing up there. "Almost there." Vast Meng Meng responded. Gu Fei saw her waving her arms with all her might, and then she jumped down from the observation deck. Bang! After landing on the ground, Meng Meng bared his teeth and cast a healing spell on himself. Gu Fei saw that she was holding something in her left hand. When he took a closer look, he was speechless. This girl had actually removed the telescope from the observation deck. "Let's go." At this time, Shi Xiaotian also climbed down, and the two of them ran to the stern together. After a few steps, they saw Gu Fei standing still. "Hurry up. Jump down and swim ashore. Do you want to be surrounded?" The two of them came up to pull Gu Fei. Don't. Gu Fei was rarely nervous. "I don't know how to swim, but I can teleport," Gu Fei calmly added. "So you guys should go." The two girls didn't delay any longer and hurried to the stern. At this point, they could already feel that the water was getting shallower and the buoyancy was insufficient. The bottom of the boat was starting to bump. If they dilly-dallied for a while before diving, they would plunge into the mud. Although Gu Fei didn't plan to dive, he followed the two to the stern. The two girls, one on the left and the other on the right, flew directly into the water. The surface of the water stirred up surging waves. Soon, their heads popped out of the water and waved at Gu Fei. At this time, the hull was shaking more and more violently. A boat was indeed a boat. After touching the land, it was not as stable as on the water. Gu Fei grabbed the railing with one hand and waved at the two girls with the other. The two swam to the other side. On the deck, Gu Fei was holding the railing and swaying, and the players at the lower ground couldn't see him. At this time, the onlookers were actively discussing the two beautiful girls on the observation deck. Why did one of them suddenly climb down and the other jump down? But among these players who were waiting for the sailboat to approach, some of them found that the boat didn't seem quite right. How could such a big boat stop? For a moment, Gu Fei and the others didn't think about it, but there were people among these players who understood. How to stop? Drop the anchor. Therefore, sharp-eyed marksmen were the first to discover that the anchor of the boat was still hanging on the side of the boat. It had no intention of dropping it, and at this time, the boat was not far from the shore. The experienced sailor players had already determined that the boat was in a state of being stranded, and was only continuing to dash forward with inertia. Therefore, after someone let out a strange cry, many people had already begun to run away. But there were always a few slow thinkers who were still looking up at the observation deck, thinking about the two beautiful girls just now and thinking about the meaning of their actions. What were they hinting at by jumping and climbing? Therefore, the more profound their thinking, the more miserable they were in the end. It was just that those who were knocked over by the boat were considered lucky. The most pitiful were those who were directly crushed under the boat. The soft sand made it possible for this to happen. At first, no one realized this. Everyone surrounded the stopped boat in amazement. Then, a few people rushed out from the crowd, screaming and banging on the bottom of the boat. After asking around, they found out that their friends were crushed under the boat, and were frantically sending text messages for help. Wow. They won't die like this? Everyone was amazed. Yes, this is amazing. A black-robed mage in the crowd of players also exclaimed in amazement. A few players beside him looked at this person with a surprised expression. They clearly didn't remember this person at this place just now. Stop watching, quickly think of a solution, the black-robed mage said as he squeezed out of the crowd, seemingly to think of a solution. Compared to the few poor people under the boat, more players were actually concerned about the two beautiful girls on the observation deck. It wasn't that he was lustful to such an extent. In fact, it was because there were two such living creatures on this miraculous boat. If this was some sort of quest, these two living creatures would definitely be an important clue. Some of the players were researching how to dig up the soil to rescue the players who were crushed under the boat. Most of them were researching how to climb up the several meters high deck. After the black-robed mage squeezed out of the crowd, he went to an inconspicuous corner and turned back to look. After waiting for a moment, he finally saw two girls sneaking out from the other side of the boat. The black-robed mage was naturally Wuxia. No one knew that he was on the boat, so he used teleportation to directly flash into the crowd and pretend to be a bystander. This might cause some people to be surprised, but Wuxia concluded that even if these people were surprised, they wouldn't be able to link him with the boat. After going around in a circle, Wuxia and the two girls met up. Naturally, the two of them were dripping wet and looked very disheveled. Xiaotian put on her cloak again, causing her face to be covered in a shadow. She urged the two to hurry. Waterside City was surrounded by a large body of water, but it wasn't as unique as Shady Forest City. It was just a castle on an island. After entering the city gate, the architecture of the city was very ordinary. "I'm going to wash up." Wuxia said goodbye to the two girls. "I'm going to polish this telescope again." The telescope had forcibly broken the connection between it and the observation deck. At this moment, the broken part was uneven, and it felt very bad. "See you later." Xiaotian didn't say what she was going to do. The three of them turned around under the city gate. Wuxia grabbed a person to ask for directions to the wanted quest office. In the vast wilderness, he asked a player where the general store was. Xiaotian had already run far away with her head down. The three of them were already busy with their own matters, but the trouble they caused wasn't over yet. The players on the shore were frantically busy. They dug holes and built ladders. After a series of tosses and turns, the sailboat that was stuck in the sand lost its balance and fiercely collapsed. This time it was very sudden. In the end, the players that were originally at the bottom of the boat were rescued. However, even more players that were at the side of the boat were smashed onto the beach. This time, some of them even lost their lives. At the same time, everyone discovered that the boat was empty. Was it a supernatural event? Everyone was indescribably shocked. Everyone pondered, studied, and investigated. This time, the first to discover it were the sharpshooters with eagle eyes. They pointed at the water again. "Look, what is that?" Thus, all the sharpshooters began to exclaim in surprise. The other players anxiously scratched their ears and cheeks. Finally, when everyone could clearly see it, a new round of discussion began. Why were there so many waterfront city guards swimming over? This matter was truly worthy of research. What kind of mission is this? Such a grand display. Everyone was very excited. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the first guard walked onto the shore. Everyone resisted the urge to applaud, their gazes closely following the guard's every move. In reality, the guard didn't do anything special. It just changed from swimming to running. The surrounding players were completely ignored by it. It continued to run forward as if there was no one around. Some players wanted to stop it and ask questions, but it ended up stepping on their bodies as it walked past. This was the highest realm of disregard. The second, third, fourth. More and more guards came ashore from this place. If they were related to the previous boat, they didn't even glance at it. Everyone acted in the same manner. They went ashore and ran. If someone blocked their way, they would directly step on them. There were still guards swimming over. The first guard that came ashore had already entered the main city. What was the meaning of this? Countless people were thinking so hard that their brains were about to explode. Should they chase after the first guard and take a look? Or should they continue to wait and see what else would come ashore? This was too difficult a choice. Wuxia, who didn't know that he had just arrived and caused so much trouble for the players, had already successfully completed 2 waves of missions. He had just received a PK value of 2. After completing this mission, his PK value would once again fall below 30. Chapter 358. Gu Fei, who had accepted the quest to get rid of his 30 PK points, was in a good mood. He was prepared to go offline immediately after completing this quest. This was something to be happy about. To be honest, Gu Fei was having a great time playing the game. In the game, he had the opportunity to fight with kung fu that he would never have in his daily life, and Gu Fei enjoyed the experience very much. However, he had always been very careful about moderation. In fact, with his work and his habits, he could definitely spare more time to play the game, but he never did so. He had always been very serious, only playing the game for 2 to 3 hours a day, enjoying the fun of kung fu fights before logging off. However, ever since he joined the guild quest, Gu Fei had repeatedly broken the time he had set for himself to log off. But this was also a helpless thing. The world of the game naturally had its rules, and sometimes they had to be obeyed. Otherwise, even in this virtual world, it would be difficult to survive. Gu Fei couldn't help but think of a saying. People in the pugilistic world cannot do as they please. He wasn't in the pugilistic world yet, it was just a stupid game. And there were some things that he was forced to do. For example, if he didn't take advantage of the moment when the guards were scattered at sea to get rid of his PK points and log off like he did yesterday, then come back the next day, Gu Fei didn't believe that he would be so lucky that there would always be bystanders who would save him every time. After experiencing being chased by the guards today to get rid of his PK points, Gu Fei knew very well that if it wasn't for the bystanders, he wouldn't have been able to get rid of his PK points. So this time, he couldn't take the risk again. He had to take advantage of the opportunity in front of him to get his PK points below 30. With such determination, Gu Fei once again delayed the time for him to go offline. The new quest that he had just received would drop his PK points to 29, which was considered a safe line for Gu Fei. He whistled, looked at the coordinates of the quest, and pushed open the door of the wanted quest office. A gust of wind blew. It was the strongest gust Gu Fei had felt since he entered the game. At that moment, Gu Fei unleashed the strongest kung fu energy he had ever displayed since he entered the game. The decision he made to dodge the gust of wind did not go through his brain. It was an instinctive reflex of his body. This was a conditioned reflex that Gu Fei practiced martial arts in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, and even in his dreams. This reflexive memory seemed to be imprinted in every inch of Gu Fei's skin, every inch of his bones, every inch of his meridians. Thus, at this critical moment, this kind of experience played a powerful role. In that instant, Gu Fei didn't even know he had reacted in such a way. His reaction was fast enough, absolutely fast. Unfortunately, no matter how fast one's reaction was, there was still a difference between a sudden attack and a prepared one. Other than that, there was another reason. Gu Fei's movements didn't speed up because of his reflexes. There was nothing he could do, because this was a game, and the speed of one's movements was always a kind of data. The reaction of the brain, or the experience of the body, could only allow one to react as quickly as possible. However, this was actually just a preparatory action. To actually perform and complete this action, one needed data. Gu Fei's data was actually not considered slow, but in this sudden attack he was still slightly slower in the face of this gust of wind. Even though his body made extraordinary judgment and reactions, it didn't help him dodge all of it. He only dodged part of it. Dodging part of it meant that part of it was also hit, so the damage was also part of it. Gu Fei lost his balance, but he didn't fall down. As long as it was possible, Gu Fei would never fall down. This time he could. Although after this gust of wind, Gu Fei's health was already in the red, he still managed to stabilize himself after staggering a few steps. The second gust of wind arrived. This time Gu Fei was prepared. Moreover, his reflexes didn't slow down at all, so this time he dodged the attack. At the same time, he saw the attacker clearly, the system guard. The system guard was indeed as strong as Gu Fei thought. These two attacks were just normal attacks, but the speed and strength were all at a level that Gu Fei had never seen before in the game. This kind of attack was even more difficult to deal with than the skill Earth-Splitting Slash. The Earth-Splitting Slash had to fly, land, and make a pose. How much time was wasted in the process? In comparison, the damage and attack range of a normal attack were certainly not as powerful as a skill like Earth-Splitting Slash, but they were clean, neat, and accurate. The simplest moves were often the most effective. This was a term that was often mentioned in Kung Fu, and it was actually reflected in this system guard. However, Gu Fei was an expert, and he still saw through the mystery behind it. A mere robot couldn't possibly display such a profound level of Kung Fu. There was only one reason for this. The difference in strength between the system guard and Gu Fei was too great. When the difference was too great, complicated moves would seem redundant. Perhaps they would be just as effective in terms of damage, but from the perspective of efficiency, they would always be inferior to simple moves. This complicated thought only flashed in Gu Fei's mind for an instant, because the opponent's third attack had arrived. One slash, another slash, and another slash. These were the three attacks that the system guard made against Gu Fei. Except for the first one, which was too sudden for Gu Fei to guard against, Gu Fei successfully dodged the last two attacks. After seeing the situation clearly, he was a little elated. There was only one guard in front of him. It wasn't hard for Gu Fei to understand what was going on. When there was a storm on the sea, who could predict where they would be swept to? Then they would rush to the same place from different places. There was always a sequence. This brother in front of him had arrived first, but his comrades might still be drifting on the sea. He might have a way to deal with the lone guard. Gu Fei was full of confidence, and didn't consider that his health was already red, and that he would die in front of such a powerful guard. The guard's fourth slash came. It was still a straight slash. Saint Seiya often said, "It's useless to use the same move against us twice." Although Gu Fei wasn't a Saint Seiya, this was already the fourth slash he had faced. The moment the opponent raised his hand, Gu Fei had already made a counterattack. The sword slashed down, and a gust of wind swept past, but Gu Fei had already dodged to the side. Dual flame flash. Gu Fei slashed down heavily. With a clang, Gu Fei's sword slashed down on the guard's shield, just like the first time he attacked this group of guards. Against such a fierce attack, their reaction speed definitely wouldn't be slow. Gu Fei didn't even pause his attack. With a quick flick of his wrist, his sword slashed down from the shield. By the side of the shield, his sword had turned into a stab, stabbing straight for the system guard's waist. Dodge. Gu Fei finally finished chanting. There was a certain amount of time between the summoning incantation and the activation incantation. Normal ranged mages didn't have much of a reaction to this setting, but for a melee mage like Gu Fei, this setting made his attacks even more unpredictable. Kung Fu moves were not as simple as a system guard slash. Every technique had multiple variations and follow-up moves. And humans didn't think in a straight line like computers, so there was no need to say how strange these techniques were. For example, when Gu Fei hit the guard just now, he had used a simple variation in this sword technique to deceive the guard's shield, and then found an opening to attack the guard's vitals. At the same time, he released the incantation, and a powerful attack was perfectly executed. When the guard was hit, it angrily turned around and slashed again, but Gu Fei had already dodged to the side. He had already stretched out his left hand, and lightning flashed in his hand. Lightning palm. Up until now, Gu Fei hadn't seriously used this skill in a real battle. This skill was to condense a bolt of lightning in the palm, and then strike it out in a straight line. To put it simply, it could be seen as a bolt of lightning that was fired in parallel. However, apart from the direction in which it was launched, this skill still had some unique characteristics. For example, it had to be released from the palm with one's bare hands. However, if the mage put away his staff and released the spell with his bare hands, the damage of the spell would be greatly reduced. Taking this into consideration, the system gave this skill a special condition. The secondary hand couldn't use it. In addition, this skill had another characteristic. The lightning needed some time to condense in the palm. This characteristic somewhat went against the quick and direct nature of lightning spells, so the power of this skill was slightly stronger than normal lightning spells. However, this was not an overpowered skill that could destroy the heavens and the earth. In fact, as a reward from the system's mission for players around level 40, this skill was not that amazing, and there were also such skill scrolls on the market. However, any magic skill had to be reconstructed in the hands of Gu Fei. For example, Although this lightning palm was also a long-range attack, it was used in close combat during practice. After condensing the lightning, he grasped the timing and struck out with his palm. Gu Fei's skills were not limited to various types of weapons. He was also proficient in many palm techniques, fist techniques, and leg techniques. To him, striking someone with his palm was as simple and accurate as slashing someone with his sword. Therefore, the moment he struck, he released the lightning palm. Having the ability to attack from a distance did not mean that its power would be reduced in the slightest at close range. In the process of Gu Fei's research, he had already killed countless monsters with his palm. Gu Fei's use of the skill gave it a new value. His main hand was the double flame flash of the Night Stream Sword, and his secondary hand was the lightning palm. This meant that as a melee mage, Gu Fei also had the mastery of both hands, just like a berserker. Moreover, the attack of his secondary hand was not weakened at all. Chapter 359. Gu Fei's left hand's lightning palm was fully formed. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as his palm struck the guard's waist. Lightning spells were always so powerful. With a flash of lightning, Gu Fei felt that it would be a waste if the guard didn't fall on the spot. Of course, the guard wouldn't fall so easily. He suddenly turned around and slashed at Gu Fei. Gu Fei dodged, and just as he was about to counterattack, the guard used a skill. It was this skill that made Gu Fei feel that there was no point in challenging the guard, and that he had no chance of winning. This was a skill that Gu Fei had seen before, and it came from an extremely despicable person. Holy Heel. In the mercenary competition, Silver Moon had used this skill against the Silver Moon mercenaries. It was a skill that paladins obtained after reaching level 40 and becoming paladins. The effect of this skill was the same as the priest's heel, but there were still some differences. The priest's heel didn't differentiate between friends and foes. Whether it was used on themselves or others, the effect was the same. On the other hand, the paladin's holy heel was most effective when used on themselves, followed by other paladins. When used on players of other professions, the effect would be greatly reduced. After testing it, he discovered that the holy healing spell had no effect on the two advanced professions, assassins and lurkers. As for the dark knights and night priests, it was a spell with great destructive power. There were so many variables to a skill, and holy heal was the most powerful one at the moment. After the guard turned around and slashed at nothing, he raised his shield, and a white light spread out from the shield and sprinkled down. The shape and posture were different from players, but anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this was a healing skill. How was Gu Fei supposed to fight this? Against the Wargen, Gu Fei could still use fire baptism to stop it from regenerating, but this guard had a healing skill. Interrupt? With this thought in mind, Gu Fei tried to attack again. After 2 waves of successful magic attacks, the guard was obviously going to recover. Gu Fei hurriedly stabbed out with his sword. According to the system's rules, regeneration was a continuous skill. If the caster was hit during the casting process, the skill could be interrupted. Gu Fei's slash was very fast. If the opponent allowed him to hit, then the skill would be interrupted at the beginning of its activation. This couldn't be any better. In the end, the guard used his shield to block Gu Fei's sword while he raised his sword above his head with his other hand. A holy white light spread out from the sword and sprinkled down. When Gu Fei's sword floated past the shield and stabbed into its body, the guard had clearly received the baptism of the white light, and did not lack any blood. I'm impressed. Gu Fei gave the guard a thumbs up and turned to run. When the system started acting like a rascal, there was really nothing he could do. This spell seemed to have the power of a priest's heel, and the speed of a paladin's holy heel. Gu Fei really wanted to spit on its face to see if he could interrupt it. In any case, Gu Fei was still treated like a god by the audience around him. Facing a powerful system guard, he could fight so many rounds, hit the guard several times, and force the guard to use regeneration twice. Where did this great immortal come from? As the players thought this, they didn't expect Gu Fei to suddenly stop fighting and turn to run. The players were instantly in a bad mood. They thought he was a hero, but it turned out he had a lousy ending. Gu Fei dashed across a street, and the guard followed closely behind. Gu Fei was also in a bad mood. He had used up all his mana without any regard for the consequences. He hated the system for having such a shameless regeneration skill. If he had known this would happen, he would have at least kept the potential of teleportation. They were less than 3 meters apart, and the guard seemed to be getting closer to him with every step, which wasn't easy to deal with. At this moment, Gu Fei missed the onlookers, but when he saw that the players who had been watching him fight with the guard were now looking at him with disdain, Gu Fei knew that he couldn't count on this unexpected soldier. Moreover, he didn't even know where the offline zone was. If he ran around randomly, he would definitely be caught by the system guards. At this moment, the wanted quest that he had just received became Gu Fei's last hope. Gu Fei was almost burning incense as he activated the wind-chasing emblem to check the coordinates. He was overjoyed when he connected the dots. It wasn't far, not far at all. It seemed that he would meet it at the entrance of the street ahead. Gu Fei charged forward, and after a few steps, a person walked out from the entrance of the street. He had a number above his head, but he didn't walk towards Gu Fei. Instead, he turned around and walked in the same direction as Gu Fei. Gu Fei saw that it would take some time, and looked behind him. It was too dangerous, so he had to take the risk. Gu Fei made up his mind and shouted, "The brother in front, wait." There were countless brothers in front of him, and when they heard the shout, they all turned around, but didn't see anyone they knew. On the other hand, Gu Fei's situation was quite eye-catching. Being chased by the guards was a crime that most people didn't have the guts to do. Everyone craned their necks to see, and at the same time, tried to figure out who Gu Fei was calling out to. Gu Fei was happy that the guy stopped, but he was afraid that this scene wouldn't attract him, so he pointed at him and said, "Wait, brother, the quest." "Me?" The guy pointed at his nose. "Yes, you." Gu Fei nodded his head vigorously. "It's not a chase, but a quest?" Everyone was surprised. "What kind of quest is this? I've never seen it before." Many people muttered. Some people even got close to the guy and winked. "Brother, what kind of quest is this?" "I don't know either." The guy was naturally very confused. As they spoke, Gu Fei had already rushed in front of them. The guy's eyes were filled with innocence as he asked Gu Fei, "What kind of quest?" Because of this innocence, Gu Fei almost couldn't bear to kill him. However, he bravely stepped over this psychological barrier and announced the answer to the guy. It wanted quest. Compared to the past, when Gu Fei announced this sentence loudly and confidently, this time Gu Fei was a bit cowardly. The people who heard it all paled. This guy obviously knew that he had PK points, and when he heard Gu Fei's answer, he almost fainted. So the guy was shouting for him to stop, and then rushing over to kill him. Who would do a wanted quest like this? The guy was confused. And Gu Fei's sword had already moved. Right now, he had no mana, and after using 2 double flame flashes and 2 thunder palms, Gu Fei couldn't even cast a lightning or fireball, and could only rely on normal attacks. The opponent in front of him just so happened to be a warrior with high HP, and not a defenseless class like a priest. As Gu Fei swung his sword, he glanced behind him. The guard's sword had already been raised, and Gu Fei had no way of instantly killing the warrior in front of him. If that was the case, he would have to fight 2 people at once. He had to put in 120% of his concentration to deal with them. Gu Fei reminded himself as he continued to swing the sword in his hand. Then he froze, then turned back again. 2 guards? For a moment, Gu Fei was in a daze. He was sure that the system guards were definitely behind him, and if they caught up to him, they would have already attacked. But in front of him, this was indeed the player from before, but this warrior was actually also a system guard with a shield in his left hand and a sword in his right. Did he really have this ability, or was he just pretending? Gu Fei had no time to think, because the warrior had already moved. Charge. When warriors piked, they would always use charge as a starter. However, the warrior held the shield in his left hand in front of him as he charged. It wasn't that Gu Fei had never seen a heavy warrior use a shield to charge, but the problem was that heavy warriors wouldn't have a sword in their hands. Dual mastery was a skill for berserkers, and heavy warriors didn't have it. The warrior in front of him had a shield in front of him and a sword hidden behind the shield. His offense was hidden within his defense, and he was using defense to attack. Just from this alone, Gu Fei could tell that this person wasn't a random passerby, but a master. At first, Gu Fei didn't take this person seriously, thinking that the guards were the ones he needed to be wary of. Now that this person had started, Gu Fei knew that dodging this attack would be much more difficult than dodging the guard's sword slash. With the sword hidden behind the shield, whether it would come from the left or the right was very different, and it would determine the direction in which Gu Fei would dodge. Uncertain, Gu Fei didn't take the risk. He had already retracted his attack, and suddenly crouched and rolled on the ground. No one could describe how fast Gu Fei rolled. This roll wasn't just a random roll. It was also a result of practice, and there was a lot of knowledge in it. Only by mastering it could one roll like Gu Fei, so fast and so cool. Naturally, the warrior had never seen such a cool roll. He felt that the target in front of him had suddenly disappeared, as if he had crouched down. He hurriedly wanted to lower his shield, but Gu Fei had already rolled to his feet. Damn, what kind of scoundrel is this? This person was also a veteran, but he had never seen such a method. For a moment, he could only react instinctively, and the sword in his hand wanted to stab at Gu Fei on the ground. This sword was originally going to stab forward, and the stance was completely set. Suddenly stabbing downwards was very uncomfortable, and it wasn't smooth at all. As a result, before he could stab his sword, he had already suffered a heavy blow to his head. In an instant he felt dizzy and wanted to vomit. He looked up and saw that the guard was holding his sword, but his eyes weren't looking at him at all. Instead, they were staring at the scoundrel at his feet. Sorry, unbeknownst to him, that scoundrel had already rolled away from his feet. At this moment, he had jumped behind him and was patting his shoulder. He turned around and wanted to say something, but suddenly felt a chill on his neck, and also saw a flash of lightning. After taking a direct hit from the system guard's sword, it was already a miracle that the warrior didn't die. He didn't have much HP left, and now that he was hit by a magic attack, the poor warrior was going to be sent to prison without even knowing what had happened. Sigh, I seem to be a little too despicable. Borrowing the hand of the guard to take down the warrior, Gu Fei patted the wind-chasing coat of arms and quickly disappeared. Butterfly knot. Ever since I returned home, my writing has been mediocre. Could it be that this thing also has a saying of choosing a seat? I've been choosing for more than a week. Chapter 360. PK Value. 29. He was teleported out of the line of sight of the system guards. There were no other system guards around, which meant he was safe. After Gu Fei walked out of the wanted quest office, he carefully inquired about the revival point and went offline. At the same time, a few members of the child elite group were sitting in a tavern in Waterside City. Qianli is still here? He should be here by now, right? I'll call him. Brother Yu was still saying this when Gu Fei's name suddenly turned black and went offline. TSK. Although Gu Fei wasn't here, he would definitely be looked down upon for going offline so early. Why isn't your friend here yet? Zhan Wushang asked as he craned his neck to look at the door of the tavern. He seemed to be someone he was looking forward to meeting. Let me ask again. Brother Yu sent the message. Immediately after, his expression became extremely shocked. What? The other four asked. He's not in the service area. Brother Yu said in a daze. Thus the other four also followed in a daze. For an expert like him, there might only be one person who can send him to prison. Brother Yu said carefully. You can't say that. As the saying goes, 2 fists can't fight against 4 hands. A good man can't fight against numbers. Don't you think Qianli is strong enough? But no matter how strong he is, if we all go up together, yes, we still have a chance. Unscathed in Battle said. Tisk? Unscathed in Battle's words were seriously looked down upon by everyone. As a top-tier expert, no one wanted to sit at the same table as him when he said such unconfident words. Since he's in prison, we can also go visit him in prison. Sword Demon suggested. Let's go take a look. Brother Yu stood up. Who's paying the visitation fee? Who's paying the visitation fee? Unscathed in Battle and Yutian Shenming both shouted. He's paying. Han family young master pointed at the door, and then waved his hand. Leader unsworn. Yo, you guys are here too. It was Unsworn Sword and his brother Fengxing who had just entered the tavern. Since solving the problem in Shady Forest City, Unsworn Sword became more and more fond of the child elite group people. The journey on the boat was so boring that he came over many times to get close to them, and expressed his concern for Comrade Gu Fei several times. Leader Unsworn, what are you doing? Han Family Young Master asked enthusiastically. Unsworn Sword hurriedly came over. Haven't we just arrived at this city? Let's take a look around and understand the situation. The tavern is indeed a good place to gather information. The young master of the Han family nodded. Of course, Unsworn Sword said happily. How long have you guys been here? We just sat here for a while. Now we're going to visit a friend. Han family young master said. A friend? Unsworn Sword mumbled as if he was talking to himself. He was quite surprised. The people in front of him were all top-notch experts in the online gaming world. They were all very arrogant. For them to take the initiative to visit, this friend was probably not a small character. Leader Unsworn, do what you need to do. We'll head over first. Han family young master gestured for the others to stand up. So they stood up one after another. Someone even deliberately said enthusiastically to Unsworn Sword. Just nice, Leader Unsworn. You can sit here. After saying that, they slowly walked towards the door. Their hearts were already filled with anticipation. Everyone had already seen through Han family young master's thoughts. Hey you guys. Just as they were about to leave, Unsworn Sword finally caught up. The five turned around and looked at him with a face full of ignorance. What's the matter? Han family young master's expression was the most ignorant one. I don't have anything to do. Why don't I go with you and sit with your friend? Let's all have some fun? Unsworn Sword suggested. We can sit, but I'm afraid we won't be able to have any fun. Han family young master said. Why? Unsworn Sword didn't understand. Because this friend is currently in prison. Han family young master said. Ah. Unsworn Sword was stunned. So he was in prison. They really had no choice but to pay him a visit. If that was the case, then this person might not be a big deal. Just as Unsworn Sword was speculating, the Han family's young master suddenly said. However, I think you should pay this friend a visit, Guild Master Unsworn. Oh, who is it? Unsworn Sword asked. Come, let's talk as we walk. Han family young master gestured. President Unsworn, don't you think the journey from Shady Forest City to Linshui City is a bit strange? Lulu asked. Han family young master suddenly changed the topic. Unsworn Sword didn't understand and could only go along with it. Why? Look, Han family young master analyzed for him. From Cloud City to Moonlit Forest City, there was a cliff and bandits blocking the way. From Moonlit Forest City to Whitestone City, there was a werewolf blocking the way. Then from Whitestone City to Shady Forest City, there was a two-way mission with Deepwater and the others. From these 3 times, each city counts as a checkpoint. The first 3 times happened on the road between the 2 cities. But this time, after leaving Shady Forest City and taking a boat to Linshui City, nothing happened. That's right, it's like this. Unsworn Sword seemed to have understood something. If we leave Linshui City now and nothing happens, doesn't this mean that the system didn't set any difficulty for the journey from Shady Forest City to Linshui City? Do you think the system would let you off so easily? Han family young master said. Of course not. Unsworn Sword blurted out. The shamelessness of the parallel world system was deeply rooted in people's hearts. No one believed that they could take advantage of the system. So tomorrow when we take Todd and leave Linshui City, something will definitely happen? Unsworn Sword said. Han family young master nodded very seriously. That's right, it must be like this. Unsworn Sword frowned and bit his finger. So, I suggest you come with us to visit this friend. Han family young master said. What do you mean? The topic had never touched on this friend before. Now that it suddenly went around, Unsworn Sword didn't understand. In Linshui City, I think he can be of great help. Han family young master said. Oh, Unsworn Sword somewhat understood. It turned out that this person was the local tyrant of Linshui City. Just like Unsworn Sword in Cloud City, if someone came to Cloud City and needed help, he could also be of great help. Understood, understood. Then let's go. Unsworn Sword urged. The 7 quickened their pace and quickly arrived at Linshui City's dungeon. How many? After submitting the visitation request, the dungeon guard asked in a methodical manner. 7. Brother Yu turned his head to take a look. It seemed like he was counting the number of people. After replying, he reached for his money pouch. Hey. How can you do this? Let me do it. Let me do it. Unsworn Sword rushed over. Han family young master promptly turned his face to the side and revealed a complacent smile. Now that things had reached this point, the child elite group felt somewhat apologetic. In fact, Unsworn Sword was not a miser. He was also a righteous person. Only because he was the leader of a major guild, he was often quite proud of himself. His arrogant behavior was somewhat displeasing to the eyes of others. However, at this moment, Unsworn Sword didn't act pretentious at all. Instead, he very humbly rushed to pay the bill. As a result, the others couldn't control themselves for a moment. In the face of such a generous scene, everyone was bound to rush to pay. As a result, everyone waved their money pouches and engaged in an intense competition. After a long time, there was no clear winner. Sword Demon shrunk to the side and calmly said, "Stop fighting. Let's split the bill." "How can that be? Let me do it." Unsworn Sword took advantage of the moment everyone was stunned and handed the money to the guard without any explanation. The guard naturally didn't care who the money belonged to. He calculated the amount and found that there were 7 people. Then, as long as these 7 players formed a party, they could smoothly enter. As soon as they entered the dungeon, the 7 people immediately felt that this trip was not in vain. Waterside City looked ordinary on the outside, but it turned out that there was such a hidden meaning. Waterside City's dungeon was actually a water dungeon, and the passage that the 7 people were currently in was above the dungeon. The water dungeon was surrounded by walls, and the iron railings were on the ceiling. At this moment, the players in the dungeon could be said to be under the 7 people's feet. The 7 people looked down and discovered another strange phenomenon. The water level in the dungeon was adjusted according to the player's height. No matter which dungeon they were in, the water was basically chest deep. This was one of the outstanding aspects of the system. If it was a dungeon in real life, it would probably be very difficult to be so considerate and considerate. The 7 people walked past a few dungeons and saw very few players. It could be seen that the water dungeon's deterrent effect was very strong, resulting in a relatively low crime rate in Waterside City. Don't think that the water dungeon was as comfortable as taking a bath. Not to mention how uncomfortable it was to soak in the water for several hours. More importantly, you couldn't sit in the water dungeon, let alone lie down. This was the truly frightening aspect of the water dungeon. Because there weren't many people in the dungeon, it didn't take long for the 7 people to find Brother Yu's friend. There was no need to talk about elegance while soaking in the water. This person's face was also gloomy. Seeing that someone had come to visit, his gloomy expression didn't lessen in the slightest. "I'm here," he said listlessly. How did it turn out like this?" Brother Yu asked. "Fuck, I met a scoundrel," the other person said. "What?" Brother Yu said. "This guy ran all the way here, and there was a guard behind him. He called me for a mission. I didn't understand, so I asked what mission it was. In the end, this guy ran in front of me and said it was a wanted mission. Then he joined forces with the guard to kill me," the friend in the water said. When the child elite group heard this, their hearts palpitated. Calling for a wanted mission, this was too much like Gu Fei's style. What did that person look like? Brother Yu's heart was in his throat. He seemed to be a mage, but I didn't see him use magic. At that time, the guard cut me down with a sword, and then he attacked me from behind. Right, he used a sword and wore a black mage robe. His attack contained lightning damage. That person described. "A video mage?" Brother Yu asked. That person immediately revealed an expression of understanding. Right. He seems to be very similar to a video mage." Thus, everyone revealed a bitter smile. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.